Good morning, everyone. The time is 9:33 a.m. As the time and place of these committee meetings was publicized by notifying the area news media, by publicizing the same, the Omaha World Herald, OPPD outlets newsletter, OPPD.com, and social media, by displaying such notice on the arcade level of Energy Plaza, and by emailing such notice to each of the district's directors on February 9th, 2024. Thank you all for joining us remotely via WebEx events. As a reminder to board members, executive leadership team, and OPPD staff, please mute your microphones and cell phones to reduce background noise. To members of the public, thank you for attending. You are in listen-only mode. If you have any technology questions, please use the chat feature in WebEx to communicate with the event host. Our agenda for today's meeting is as follows. We will conduct a closed session this morning to discuss one topic, appointment of Vice President, Security and Facilities. We will conclude this morning's closed session no later than 9:50 a.m. in order to open the WebEx meeting to allow public and OPPD staff to join. We will begin public session at approximately 10 o'clock a.m. and receive reports from each committee. Dr. Bogner, do we have a motion to go into closed session?
We do. I move that the board go into closed session at this time, 9:34 a.m. to discuss one topic, appointment of Vice President, Safety and Facilities. With respect to the appointment of Vice President, Safety and Facilities, a closed session is necessary because the discussion will involve competitive and confidential compensation and retention information. This motion requires a second.
Second.
Director Bogner?
Yes.
Director Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Director Ford?
Yes.
Director Howard is absent. Director Mulhoff?
Yes.
Director Moody is absent. Director Spurgeon?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes. The motion to go into closed session has passed. This closed session will be limited to discussion regarding one topic, appointment of Vice President, Safety and Facilities. No votes or other board action will be taken. Motion and a second is required to reconvene in open session.
So moved.
Second. Director Bogner?
Yes.
Director Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Director Core?
Yes.
Director Howard? Director Mulhoff?
Yes.
Director Moody? Absent. Director Spurgeon?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes. The motion to come out of closed session at 10:06 a.m. is carried. The closed session was limited to discussion regarding one topic, appointment of Vice President, Safety and Facilities. No votes or other board action was taken. Notice of the time and place of these committee meetings was publicized by notifying the area news media, by publicizing the same, the Omaha World Herald, OPPD outlets newsletter, OPPD.com, and social media, by displaying such notice on the arcade level of Energy Plaza, and by emailing such notice to each of the district's directors on February 9th, 2024. Thank you all for joining us remotely via WebEx events. As a reminder to board members, executive leadership team, and OPPD staff, please mute your microphone and cell phone to reduce background noise. Members of the public, thank you for attending. You are in listen-only mode. If you have any technology questions, please use the chat feature in WebEx to communicate with the event host. Per the board's guidelines for public participation, we do not take public comment during the all-committee meeting today. We will take public comment at the board meeting on Thursday, February 15th, which will be conducted in person at the Omaha Douglas Civic Center and will begin at 5 o'clock p.m. The public may attend in person or remotely via WebEx events by going to OPPD.com. Joining me today in person are my fellow board members, Amanda Bogner, Mike Kavanaugh, Matt Core, Janice Mulhoff, and Mary Spurgeon. Sarah Howard and Craig Moody are unable to attend today. We also have members of our executive leadership team, our general counsel, Steve Bruckner, with the Fraser Stryker Law Firm. Floyd Meyerson is standing in for Steve today. Apologies. Fraser Stryker Law Firm and OPPD staff. Additionally, we currently have 22 attendees in the meeting online, consisting of OPPD employees and members of the public. Today, we will hear the following committee reports. The governance report given by Director Bogner, the finance report from Director Spurgeon, the customer and public engagement report from Director Core, standing in for Director Howard, and the systems management and nuclear oversight report, also from Director Core, standing in for Director Moody. Javier Fernandez will now give the safety briefing.
Trustee, want to do this? Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Start with a quick safety briefing. As we know, the emergency exits are at the either end of the room. If we had to evacuate the building, please move over to the hotel lobby area there. That's where we'll meet. That way we can take account for everyone just to make sure that everyone gets out safely. Hopefully we won't have to worry about that. In the event of any type of weather, we will go to the stairwells as directed by the Blue Cross Blue Shield security personnel, and we'll take shelter there. Always remember that we do have AED, first aid equipment, and fire suppression materials right outside the doors or near to the bathroom area.
Also, if anybody needs any assistance during this meeting, please get a hold of an OPPD member. There are members of the security force here. We will assist you as best we can as well. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the president and have a great meeting.
Thank you, Josh. Can we go back quickly on the psychological safety? Very important for us to keep in mind psychological safety and cybersecurity. And psychological safety, I'm going to talk just quickly about the culture of curiosity. I was chatting with a relatively new employee not that long ago, and telling me, well, I'm just learning about the electric utility industry. And my comment, a little bit joking and probably a lot not joking, is like, yeah, we're all learning. It doesn't really matter how many decades you've spent in this industry. It's so complex. And I think having that culture of curiosity, always wanting to learn something new, different ways, better ways to continue to do our job, is important for us to have the psychological safety, in that it's safe for us to ask questions and always try to learn. It doesn't matter how many years you've been doing this work, there's always something new to learn. Cybersecurity, very important. Just a reminder of our policies, our practices, and training that we have on cybersecurity, especially with phishing attacks, making sure that we are always on the lookout for malicious links before we click. Something new that I learned not that long ago was the type of phishing that happens with QR codes. Quishing, I think that's the term. Where we're all now learning how to, with your phone, you scan a QR code to access a menu on a restaurant or different things. Well, that also presents an opportunity for bad actors to access, and it's no different than a click on a malicious link. So it's another level of awareness as we're now accessing different sites of the internet and potentially malicious links. Be aware of not all of these are going to come in the same format as they've come before. Bad actors continue to get better at making us make mistakes. Next slide, please. Our safety focus for February pre-job briefs. We're getting into the spring season. Believe it or not, it's still cold outside, but taking the time to brief the crews on, before we begin a job, situational awareness, potential hazards is really, really, really important. I think it's probably the most important tool. It's that discussion we have with our co-workers to improve our human performance before the job begins, not during the job. In the same token, warming up, doing different warm-up exercises before the job begins will improve our chances of not having strains or tear injuries. As I mentioned a few weeks ago, 2023, we had our safest year on record. Doesn't mean we didn't have injuries. We have a number of injuries. They were soft tissue injuries, and this is what we're trying to prevent with warming up those soft tissue injuries. And February is American Heart Month, a time when all of us can focus on our cardiovascular health. If you haven't had your annual physical, please, I encourage you to do so, honoring the Heart Health Month. That concludes my safety briefing.
Great, thanks very much. The first committee this morning is the Governance Committee. Director Buckner, do you have a chair report?
I do, thank you. The Governance Committee met on February 6th at 8 a.m. All committee members were present. Here's our agenda. The prior month's committee actions were completed. Item 4 will be presented during this meeting, so we will skip over that here. The committee reviewed the Governance Committee charter, and no changes to the charter were identified. Additionally, the Finance Committee requested that we review the Audit Subcommittee charter. As I'm sure Director Spurgeon will highlight in her report later, this committee charter does not explicitly outline which board members should serve on the Audit Subcommittee. The Governance Committee discussed a few potential paths that we could take to help clarify this, but one path may lead to a bylaws revision. Instead of trying to unpack and resolve this during the Governance Committee, Governance recommends that this become a topic for us to talk about during the board workshop in August. So later today, Chair Williams, I'll be recommending that this item be added to the board work plan. The committee reviewed the annual planning calendar that outlines the expected topics that the governance committee will discuss each month. No questions or revisions were made to the planning calendar. Finally, the governance committee had 2 work plan items on our agenda this month. The first was Scott Bosch has been working on developing a specific outline for the parliamentarian's role. As you'll recall, we talked about the parliamentarian becoming part of our practice here during the board workshop that was held last fall. The committee asked some clarifying questions and asked Scott to present the definition of the role in the March CPE pre-committee meeting so that the full board has awareness on how the parliamentarians will show up during pre-committee, all committee, and board meetings. Once the CPE committee has been briefed, governance will close this work plan item. The second item from our board work plan was to review BL 1, 5, and 7, and we've tabled this to March due to our meeting time constraints. So with that, we'll move on to our first committee item here today. And I'll turn it over to CEO Fernandez.
Thank you, Director Bogner. It is my pleasure to bring this item to the board. One is my duty to replace and find a Vice President of Facilities and Safety, but it is also a pleasure to chat with you about the candidate that I have selected. And the proposal for the board would be to, on Thursday, to consider approval of salary for this new Vice President. I have selected Gina Lango to be our next Vice President for Safety and Facilities Business Unit. I am thrilled about this for many reasons, but probably the most important is because Gina has an outstanding career behind her, not only at OPPD, but also with her time spent at MUD. There are a few times when I can talk about an executive or an employee who has such a vast experience in the utility industry in Omaha, serving gas, water, electric, all really for the public purpose of serving our customer owners. Gina has an engineering degree from UNL and an MBA from UNO, so a educational product of the University of Nebraska system. She's fantastic. She started her career in 1990 at MUD, where she worked for 15 years as a utilization engineer and as an assistant superintendent in the gas production side of the business. And most recently, after serving for a few years at OPPD, she went back and served as Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at MUD from 2021 to 2023. In between those two periods at MUD, she worked at OPPD. She joined OPPD in 2005 and served in many, many different roles, including an engineer in the demand side and sustainability management, manager of fossil fuels, and director of continuous improvement. So she's worked at OPPD in many, many divisions, business units. She's known by employees. One very important aspect of that I considered in selecting this candidate was I needed people to trust this person. I think that's something that Gina brings. It's many, many years of experience and relationship building and trusting with employees. And this becomes really, really important, especially as I have the leader of safety, as someone who can be trusted, who has relationships with people. It's not just an executive leading the business unit, which is an important role, but it's someone who connects with anyone in the organization, and people in the organization feel comfortable coming to her with concerns, with ideas for improvement, for really to continue to foster the safety culture we have at OPPD. It is an absolute pleasure for me to announce this candidacy. What we will ask, the board has an opportunity to meet with her and chat with her as I think the executive leadership team, we've all known her for many, many years. What we will ask the board to consider is on the next slide, which is her salary. If you remember, and this may be for the public's benefit as well, each vice president, we have a salary range for each vice president, depending on the job they do, depending on market comparables. Our human capital team has assisted us in coming up with a range for each one of the vice presidents. We reviewed those ranges last year. About 12 months ago, we had a benchmarking analysis. So the range was established last year. And the reason I mentioned the range is because the salary that we assign to each vice president is relative to that range, especially to the midpoint of that range. As a relatively new executive, we typically have that range be in the 80 to 85th percentile of that midpoint. And my proposal here, because Gina has already a couple of years of experience working in an executive role, she's not a new executive necessarily. So instead of coming in at 80%, our proposal is to bring her at 83% of that midpoint, which results in a salary of $305,200. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I'll just say, as you mentioned, every board member had an opportunity to meet with Ms. Langle over the last couple of weeks, and I found her very impressive. I've known her for a long time, but I think that she'll fulfill this role in an incredible way. Very supportive of this. All right, we can move on to the next topic. Thank you. All right. VP Brown, you're up with SD 12, Information Management and Security Policy Revisions. Sure thing.
Safely.
Safely, no cords.
Without my glasses on, which probably isn't fun. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Great to be here. So,
Go for it.
You're good, okay. Didn't want to jump ahead. I'm prone to do that because I'm excited. So what we have up here is the current SD 12. You note we have not updated this since 2016, so time has passed. Many things have happened in the space of security. And when we reported on the monitoring report in November, the board thoughtfully asked the question, is there anything about this that would help the organization if we were to alter SD 12? So we went back and looked at SD 12 and came back with some revisions. And much of the revisions are around physical security, because that is a component, as you read through this, it is not touched on. And at the time and place this was written, the focus was more around the records management, compliance, and cybersecurity. We also looked at it from the perspective of house cleaning, so to speak, but a little bit more than that, in terms of, does this align the way it's written to the other SDs that have been reworked over time? And it didn't. It had some things that needed to be altered. Additionally, for the title of it, we wanted to pull security to the forefront in front of information management, because security is so foundational, so important, meaning cyber and physical security. So we went through it with those, that was our lens of how we looked at it and what other things might help the organization to achieve what's being asked by the board in this SD. So this is the current. I think if we go forward, we will see the process. And this is the process of what this goes through for the refinement. And then we will see, sorry, we're good. Then we'll have the red line and then the proposed final of SD 12. So as you can see, we've added the security in that is more physically related. So we have a safe and secure environment. I'm on the first bullet below the above paragraph, a safe and secure environment for all OPPD personnel, contractors, visitors, operations, and properties. Very, very important. And then security processes to support emergency management, vulnerability, and behavioral threat management programs, and utilize applicable national, industrial, and communication security best practices. We've evolved a lot in these spaces. Back in time, we would not have been able to, kind of walk in the space we are today. So I'm very proud of the organization in terms of what we've done from a security perspective. And these two components will really drive that further into the organization. So it's very exciting. The other red lines that you see here are really more about cleaning up the language, as I mentioned. So that's what you see in the other sections and making it align, like I said, to the other SDs that are out there from a structure and grammar perspective. I'll say. So like I said, on the other side, we have the final version of this. And so this is the recommendation we have to bring this forward with these modifications. I'll pause for any questions or comments.
Yeah, so I appreciate the discussion questions that are up above. So is there anything that we need further clarification on? Anything that you especially like or anything that you'd like the committee to consider before moving this to public review, which is our next step in the process?
So I just wanted to ask one question. Does this make your job easier? Does it make it clearer about what your performance parameters are? And does this help your team be able to focus on the work that they need to do? That was a lot of questions, but
I'll take the easier. I don't know easier is how I frame it.
clearer.
But clear, yes, I will take that one and say, yes, clearer. And clearer and clarity, I always equate to easier, so there's not the ambiguity of what we are doing. And I believe this gives the organization much guidance that will help them do what they are trying to do, the protection of the assets and the people at OPPD. And I want to say, I really appreciate all of this process and the input that we got. Folks that work in these spaces and the strategic directors in general really provide fantastic guidance. And the employees have learned to go back to and go, oh, okay, wait, if we do this, it really does align here. This is great. We can see the mapping all the way to the board. So I just want to comment how great the strategic directives are and the input that we got on this to help. There were some things that needed some cleaning up, I'll say, in terms of our original proposal, and appreciated the feedback.
I like the cleanup. It's very clean. Yeah, it's so much clearer. There were considerations in the audit last year, which takes into a lot of factors, not just information and record keeping. So are you comfortable that this addresses some of the deficiencies in the audit that were identified last year? As far as safety and
Security that were
yeah.
identified. I do. I think this, going back to the clarifying comment and what this is and what it will drive into the organization, I think this would be very beneficial for everyone. Whether you're in security or not, because security is across the entire company, whether you work in it officially or you're an employee, I think this brings great clarity across the entire organization. So yes, I believe we've hit the mark here in a very good way.
And I will piggyback on your comment that it addresses physical security and operation centers. I think that's terrific. That was included. Thank you.
From a timeline perspective, our last monitoring report was in November of 2023. Do we anticipate changes to the upcoming monitoring report based on this language? Because it's kind of in this weird limbo of it's almost a year until the next monitoring report will be due, or are we expecting a similar monitoring report? What do we anticipate as the reportable outcomes next time we talk?
So my plan would be, there's no Scott here.
So
I'm gonna,
go ahead.
our plan would be if this is put into official document of the SD going forward, we would then take that and work towards it. Since we're so early in the year, we would take this up and the monitoring report would address the new version if that's the question at hand. That's how we would approach it in our space of what we would do. Javier.
I agree, especially because it's not a deviation from the previous one, it's an augmentation, so to speak. I think we're augmenting the cyber aspects with security aspects, so it's a relatively straightforward way for us to augment then the monitoring report to include aspects that were previously not included in any other monitoring report. So I welcome that opportunity to do that and bring that to the board in November.
So anticipating additional information in the upcoming monitoring report relative to the last one based on the new language is kind of what we should expect from the oversight perspective. Great.
Very much so. And I want to be clear, the things that we have listed in here, they are not things we have not been doing. It's not like now we're going to start doing it. We've been working towards these things. There's been many actions taken along the lines of what is here. It's what helped us articulate these bullets that are here. So yes, I just wanted to add that.
Sounds good. Glad to see the updates.
All right, I don't think that there's any more questions or comments, so thank you. Our next steps here, we would recommend that this now move forward to the public comment and review period, since we didn't have any recommended changes today out of this conversation. So that's typically I'm gonna look at VP Olson, that's usually a 30-day review period, so this should be,
Forward to the next.
so we should be able to have this on the agenda for March as to hear those comments and then decide whether we're moving forward with the vote. So, all right, and with that, the committee rests.
Great, thanks very much. Next committee on the agenda is the Finance Committee. Director Spurgeon.
Thank you, Chair Williams. We met by video conference on February 2nd, and following a safety briefing, we moved into a claim settlement report, which we will hear today. We also heard a pledged securities report, which again, we will hear today. Item 4, preliminary 2023 financial results. This item was placed on the agenda at my request. I concurred with our CFO on a decision to move some monies from one account to another, and I wanted to share that decision with other members of the Finance Committee. It's a little piece of a big picture, and so that will be fully reported when the final report is ready and released for everybody. Then we proceeded with the charter review of the Finance Committee. For people listening and members of the public, it is a document that outlines the committee's structure and operations and the duties and responsibilities, which involve a long list of SDs and board linkage policies and governance process items, and is quite specific in regard to what our responsibilities are. So we reviewed that and found needed no additions or corrections. Then we went to the audit subcommittee charter, which we noticed, wasn't very clear about how people were appointed and who that was to be and how that was all to work. So we nicely referred it to the governance committee, which was meeting later, which you've already heard about. So that will be attended to at a later time. We'll get that sorted. Following that, we took a look at the annual work plan, and I have to commend everybody on the finance team, because I'm sure they have worked. Everybody was asked about this, but this is just a way for us to see what's coming up from month to month, what are the business items that we need to attend to. It's a great help to me as treasurer and chair of the committee to have an advanced look at that. And I think it helps everybody kind of look at the rhythm through the year of the items that come across. And this has been updated to say, well, happens at our little pre-committee meeting, and that this happens at all committees. And yeah, anyway, it's a very nice amplification of that work plan. So I very much appreciate that. So we had a little summary of the meeting, and then we were adjourned. So I think I go back to claim settlement report. Oh, Lisa Huff is up for that. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Here to meet our statutory requirement to report out to you a claim that we had settled for over $50,000. As you can see here, it's very simple. We were installing, our crews were working, and we had a fiber duct. It contained 5 separate lines. 2 of those lines are owned by the company listed here, OPTK. They have made a claim for the damages to repair those cables for $107,500. Through our negotiations, we were able to reduce that settlement down to the $99,990. However, that did reach the threshold over $50,000, and so that's a statutory requirement to come before you today. No injuries when this happened, so any questions I can answer for you for that?
Only 2 lines were damaged in this?
All 5 were damaged. So the other 2, the remaining 3 cables are owned by 2 separate companies. So depending on what they report for their damages, we may or may not be for you again.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Would we be able to make an insurance claim on this, or does this fall underneath the deductible?
Correct. It falls under our self-insured retention level.
And lots of lessons learned, right? I mean, this is something that we work and the crews know. It provided a good opportunity for us to improve processes and awareness of human performance. And Troy's team is aware and
Yeah.
learning lessons as we go.
Okay, thanks so much.
And the next item is the pledge securities.
Thank you. We've got John
Bishop.
Julis, the manager of Treasury Investments and Debt, who will walk us through the annual reporting item. Thanks, John.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
I'm John Trillis, and today I'll be covering the pledge securities reporting item. Pledge securities are guarantees by financial institutions if we hold balances greater than the $250,000 FDIC insurance limit. And this is mandated by state statute. Pledge securities include banks holding U.S. government securities or things like a letter of credit from a federal home loan bank and so forth. We have two institutions that may have to hold pledge securities on our behalf. The first is Wells Fargo Bank, which is our main commercial bank. And the second is U.S. Bank, who primarily provides custodial services for us. We do have relationships with a number of other banks, but these banks are what's called collection banks. So they're essentially helping us to collect payments from customers, and their balances aren't sufficient enough for us, aren't over the $250,000 FDIC limit, so they do not have to hold pledge securities. That essentially concludes my remarks. I'd take any questions.
I always found this limit to be low, especially given inflation and things like that. Is there anything that's happening to increase the FDIC limit?
You know, I haven't heard anything during the financial crisis, 2008, 2009. It did become unlimited for a number of years, and then it went back down to the 250,000. It used to be $100,000. I think there's probably pushback from the financial institutions because they're essentially paying for this as insurance, but I haven't heard anything that would
Any
raise that.
rumblings? Okay,
So.
thank you.
Questions? Observations? Yeah, it's a case of board members of organizations of all kinds, beware.
Right.
Just be careful with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that concludes finance committee.
Great.
Chair Holmes?
Thanks very much. Next committee is the Customer and Public Engagement Committee, and Director Corr standing in for Director Howard, who's unavailable. Chair report.
We met on February 5th via WebEx. We talked about the legislative update, grants update. Both of those will be talked about in just a minute. We had some talk on the generation communication, progress on community engagement and outreach. We went over the committee's charter. We review that annually. There weren't any changes to the charter. Then we looked at the board work plan. There were items for policy refinement for SD 11 and SD 13 that were holdovers from a while ago, and the committee agreed that we would mark those completed and revisit if needed at the annual board workshop. So those are cleared off the work plan. That's all I have, and I'll turn it over to Vice President Olson.
Thank you so much, Director Corr. Yes, those were holdovers from eons ago. So thank goodness to Scott Foch and Aaron for capturing all of the information from our workshops and so forth. So we were able to modify your input into our monitoring reports, which I think really scratched the itch there. So, hey, it is day 27 of a short session and things are moving really quick. In fact, Seth Wales is right now in the rotunda. We have a priority bill for its LB 71, which is dark fiber. That is really there to help with rural Nebraska as well, because we have fiber and we're feeling that we really would like to have others, no matter what, join in on that particular dark fiber plan. And with that, we are going to give you a quick legislative update. And since Seth is there, Brooke Aiken is pitch hitting there, our Director of Economic Development and External Communications. Brooke.
All right, good morning. Thank you, Lisa. As Lisa said, I'm pinch hitting today. A lot has happened since the last time we provided an update. There have been 596 bills introduced, and really want to take a moment to thank everyone that's been involved across the district. We have a very thorough process at OPPD, and it takes a lot of subject matter experts to really review and evaluate all those bills. So special thanks to our team, including Seth and Kelly Fleming, along with Steve Bruckner and many others that have been focused on that. As Lisa said, it's day 27 today. We're about halfway through the short session. And this is a reminder of where we're at in this process. So the hearings started on January 22nd. Those are underway. This week is significant as February 14th. Tomorrow is the last day to request a speaker priority. And then Thursday is the last day for senator and committee priority designation. February 29th is the last day of public hearings, followed by floor debate, which begins on March 4th. The next two slides cover key bills and topics. And I'll put a highlight on these. Several of these have had hearings in the last few weeks. So one of those is LB 1370. This would require electric utilities to replace retired dispatchable electric generation with a dispatchable electric generation facility of equal or greater nameplate. And we testified in opposition of this bill due to some of the challenges and implications. We are currently working with all members of the committee on this bill and potential amendments involving that. 399 is a carryover bill still held in committee. There might be an amendment there. 1366, this changes provisions related to the use of eminent domain. There was a hearing held on February 2nd. We testified in opposition. It would add a good faith definition to negotiations and requires an inventory of damages from examining and surveying the property to be given to an owner, along with requiring an appraisal. There's good intention with this bill, but there's certainly implications for us as a utility in this space. So we are currently meeting with the bill sponsor on that and furthering discussions involving this legislation.
Brooke, may I pause there for a moment? During this hearing, public power was really lifted up as the beacon of how you should be doing eminent domain, because you do work with the landowners. And so much of this particular bill, we already do. So they were trying to get other industries to come along and have best practices. So
this goes beyond utilities and basically.
definitely.
That's
Because
correct.
there's so many different rules for so many people, and there's good actors and bad actors, right?
That's a great point. Yep, it prohibits political subdivisions from taking property through eminent domain outside of our political subdivision boundary. LB 61, Lisa hit on this one. This one, we will get real-time updates today. It's hitting the floor, and there's a potential amendment there. LB 1234, Senator Wayne is sponsoring this bill. It was reintroduced for us this year. This is our second year trying for it. Funding, we know, is going to be difficult. We're going to certainly push for it and work with the Appropriations Committee on this. It would appropriate about $2 million to the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy to assist with administering and implementing weatherization programs. We were at the hearing on that, of course, and certainly in support of it. 1218, this hasn't been scheduled for a hearing, but wanted to make a note of this. It's mainly about EV charging stations. It has some challenging provisions like the right of first refusal to keep us out of building charging stations of our own. This would allow private entities to charge by the kilowatt hour. And right now, only utilities can do that. So there is some concern in the industry around this. And there are also increased taxes and registration fees on EVs that is tied to this bill. So we've been working with the bill sponsor on this and a lot of different stakeholders. So you think the truck stops, the convenience stores, charging manufacturers, a lot involved on this one in the bill, and we will continue to work to try to get to a resolution on it. 1277, this would allow political subdivisions that supply electricity, natural gas, water, or sewer services the authority to request an emergency proclamation directly to the governor without first requesting an emergency proclamation from a county or other governmental entity. This was referred to the Government, Military and Veteran Affairs Committee, but it has not yet been scheduled for a hearing, so it's certainly focused on this one. Deceptive practices for door-to-door installers. There was a recent meeting we had with the Attorney General's office, and there's still potential for legislation next year on this one. 969, this changes provisions related to contracts and sealed bids for public power districts from what is now $500,000 to $2 million. This is an OPPD bill. We certainly are in support of it. And we anticipate there could be an amendment on this around the dollar threshold. So we're working closely with the bill sponsor and the committee around this one. 1358 requires approval of the registered voters to increase salaries of governing bodies of political subdivisions. We will do what we can to make sure we can advance the bill forward. Some of the language is a challenge, and we're working with Senator McDonald to see if we can get it to a better place. 1300, this is a Bow-Star bill at the request of the governor, which adopts the Pacific Conflict Stress Test Act and the Foreign Adversary Contracting Prohibition Act. We testified in opposition and also on behalf of the Nebraska Power Association. We are certainly supportive of the intent around this bill, but we know that the language really does matter on this one, and we want to ensure it's in a better place than it is now. So we're working closely with the governor's office, the committee, and the bill sponsor around this one. There's also, as you can see, a host of different topics that are being discussed in the session. We're monitoring a lot of bills. I was just talking to Kelly this morning. I think we're well over 100 that we're focused on. So that's a preview of some of the key bills that we're after. The slide following this really recaps those bills of interest that we are focused on with recent hearings. So if we can skip to the next, at the federal level, we will give an update. Our main focus involves a couple of things. One is the appropriations for the Offutt microgrid. This is designed to install a microgrid control system to cover immediate critical mission gaps. So we're working with a lot of key stakeholders and of course Offutt on this one. The Water Resources Development Act, if we can address the ice jams, this is that year because we know it only comes up every 2 years. So there is close coordination, a lot of momentum to look to put together a bill. And we know it's better to be early than late, and it involves Congress. So we are working under the assumption that this will get done, and we want to ensure it's in the right spot. We're also closely coordinating and working with a lot of our stakeholders on the federal side and different groups, including the American Public Power Association, the LPPC, the American Clean Power Association, NEI, on a lot of different topics and issues. So we're talking with our delegation as well. We're in constant communication and wanting to make sure we're coordinated and aligned on all different areas of focus, from IRA to IIJA, direct pay, transformer reserves, really wanting to be efficient on those issues. The next slide covers our next steps. So we will continue to keep you updated in our weekly recaps, the bi-weekly directors updates, other bill status updates as they become relevant, and of course, our monthly pre-committee and board committee meetings. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Been spending a lot of time down in the rotunda. When Brooke and the team said that there's over 100, that's just not monitoring. These are ones that really have an impact on the utility business. A decade ago, we maybe had a handful here or there. So the world has changed, definitely. And this is the part where we really have to be on our toes because things can be negotiated quickly on the floor of the legislature.
You know, I've always wondered, the lobbyist down there, like Seth, does he have office space or does he have to sit on a bench with his laptop? What do they?
Well,
Oh. I'm surprised they have space for him. I'm surprised that they wouldn't just sit on
there
it.
used to be a bench that was the Tom Richards bench,
Okay.
literally. But Seth also is heading up the legislative for the MPA,
Oh.
which, and then also Laura King Homan is leading up the marketing and communications. So OPPD, once again, with LPPC and APPA, we're leaders and really taking a lot of the leadership on for the industry.
A question, previous slide, the acronyms. I know what APPA is and LPPC, NEI, sorry, and
Yes.
ACP.
Nuclear Energy Institute
Okay, thank you.
We'll spell that out.
and Large Public Power Council. Yes.
Oh, okay. And ACP?
American Clean Power. Yes. Great
We
question.
get a few of them every month, don't we?
And at the risk of pointing out the obvious here, the session ends April 18th, which is the same day as our April board meeting. So I would expect us to receive these type of briefings for 2 more months, especially on the state side. And then probably right after that, we'll focus on federal.
Great point. Right. Thank you.
Okay, moving on next to our quarterly update for grants, and Carissa is going to be giving us an update. We're also going to be doing the same update in the Finance Committee since this falls under their charter as well. And with that, Carissa, thank you for all of the great work. I know it's been a collaborative effort between our teams, much of the industry, and we'll give you a quick update.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. Here's your 5-minute rundown of all the grant work that's been going on. It's been extremely busy. This slide just highlights the grants we currently have funded. We have a congressionally directed spending project secured through Congressman Bacon's office for some grid resiliency work. That work is ongoing. We have a grant through FEMA for some distribution. It's a study of our distribution system with mitigation measures prioritized. That work is also in progress. You may have heard of the the Douglas County, OPPD Douglas County solar project on the landfill. That one has kicked off and is underway. We have a Department of Labor grant, and then the big one from the infrastructure bill is the JTIQ for the 87.5 million. Next slide, please. So for recent grants awarded, you may have heard about the solar corner cash. We just got that awarded from the Nebraska Environmental Trust for $500,000. More details will be coming on this one. We haven't even signed the paperwork, so I don't want to get too far ahead. And then we have a Solar for All grant pending with the EPA. This is funded through the IRA. We will not know until probably March. And I think that might be a little optimistic. We'll see. These federal agencies are a little slow to roll these things out. They're very busy. So OPPD is a utility partner or coalition partner in that grant, along with NPPD, LES, and Grand Island Utilities. So more to come on that one. Next slide.
Sorry, on the,
Go ahead.
apologies, on the environmental trust grant, yep, the solar corner cash, does that overlap with the corporate operating plan capital project referred to as partnership solar? Is that kind of the same thing? It specifically references corners of farm fields.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great,
Not heard that title, but yes, it's the same, project.
Same concept, same quarter.
great. Glad to hear it. Thanks very much.
I may have repackaged it a little bit for the grant application. So yeah, it's a little different name. Before we move on, down at the bottom, we have a little note about some of the grants that we're pursuing. We don't want to discuss them before they go in. So it's been very busy. January, putting in pre-applications, concept papers. As you might remember, that's like the first stage to get to the invitation to apply. So know that that work is going on. They should be able to talk about that at the next update, which ones are moving forward. So a lot of work in that area in the last couple months. Next slide, please. Just a couple other grant updates. OPPD has joined a long duration energy storage consortium. Sandia National Lab received a IIJA grant, and OPPD applied and was accepted. So we're a teaming partner. This gives us access to some other national labs, other utilities, industry. It's a great opportunity. Mike Lisave from Systems Transformation is leading this. He's excited to jump in. And then another item of note, OPPD provided a letter of support. Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy reached out. They've been a great partner to us. We provided a letter of support to them for a grant that they are eligible for, being funded through, I believe this one is IRA. Oh, it says IRA. IRA for some contractor training. So we were happy to support this effort. We will probably join as an advisor on their advisory board when they get this project stood up. So happy to support that. Next slide. Just next steps, I'll continue to come back and update. You'll probably get a better update the next quarter, which grant concept papers and pre-applications are moving forward. We'll continue to vet grant opportunities, making sure we're getting the best return on our investment. These grants are hundreds of hours to put just the applications in. And compliance, big piece of these grants is compliance. So working through all the different compliance pieces. That's it. Okay, I'll turn it to Lisa. Or questions?
I have a question. Does any of this grant work circle back directly to the work that we've done with the North Omaha community and what they identified as their needs going forward? And do any of these grants kind of address those concerns that they had in their community? I didn't, it's not obvious the way you presented it, but how is this grant process helping that initiative?
Chris, I can go ahead and take that. During our listening sessions and our engagement, we did talk to them about various opportunities as well. Specifically, we've been working with the communities to help them if they want to apply for a grant as well. So as you can tell, Carissa has a lot on her plate, along with reaching out to all of the other business units as well. We do have an opportunity that, thanks to my colleagues here, that we'll be posting for another grant, another Carissa, and another grant writer as well, that hopefully then we can do a little bit more community specific.
I will tell probably the one that gets me excited, and takes time, is the energy efficiency contractor training. As you know, I serve on the board for Habitat for Humanity, and we've had many conversations about the need we have in the state for energy efficiency auditors, contractors. A lot of these grants, both federal and state, require a qualified, a certified energy efficiency auditor to come in and do the work. And many times it's been frustrating when you have dollars sitting on the sidelines waiting to be deployed, and there aren't enough people that are qualified and certified to do that work. These grants will help on that front. So I think that going back to our customer owners, regardless of where they are, but certainly something that we heard through our communications and engagements in North Omaha with different community members, it's help us weatherize, have energy efficiency projects that will help both lower their consumption, it will help the utility lower the load, and there are dollars available. We need qualified contractors to help move that.
And hence the bill that with Senator Wayne on weatherization, that was impetus of that outreach as well.
I'd also add the Solar for All grant is targeted for low income. So I believe that might go to what you're asking about. Yeah, hopefully we get that one funded.
Thanks for the question.
So on that, from the last slide, we talked a little bit about energy efficiency. There are federal funds available for that type of work, the homes program. Do we have any update on, I believe that has to go through the state, correct?
Correct.
And that there's nothing we can do directly in that area. So do we have any status update on what the state's anticipated timeline is for either, I can't remember if they need to still apply for the funding or if they just need to develop the program to implement the funding?
Great question. Yeah, I talk with NDE every couple weeks. They do have to apply for those funds. And they have not, I don't believe they have yet. So that's underway. So they'll have to apply and then get funded by or approved by DOE and then implement a program. So it's going to be a little while.
Yeah, so they have not applied yet. Have they expressed an intention to apply?
They do, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's also staffing for them as well.
Yeah.
Because once you get the grants, then on top of that, then you have to have the staff that can implement it as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's right. I mean, the reason I'm interested is the kind of order of magnitude increase in funding available there. We have legislative bill on the order of $1 million or $2 million, and then another bill, or I'm sorry, grant that was listed on a previous slide of about $1.6 million. But the homes program is tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And so in terms of prioritization for funding available for a contractor and workforce development and implementation of projects, you know, it is on the order of 2 orders of magnitude larger funding pool available. And so I hope that we are doing everything we can to assist the state and that NPPD and other utilities in the state are also leaning heavily on. This is a huge pool of money that is designed specifically to benefit people in all of our service territories, and we need them to take steps in order to bring those benefits to our state. So if there's anything we can do to facilitate that discussion, please let us know. But that is, again, it's good to have lots of grants in lots of places, but orders of magnitude larger funding pool available, but someone else has to take some actions. And so I hope we are strongly collaborating with them to see that happen.
Great question. Yep, we are definitely coordinating with them. So
Great. Glad to hear it.
thank you.
Back to you, Director Cork.
I'll pass it right over to the McGrady for our product services and rec updates.
Good morning, everyone. I'll invite Mr. Martinez forward. If he walks at the right pace, I'll finish just as he gets here. So what you'll hear today is a brief update on a product and service offering that's been under development for a while called renewable energy credit sales. And you'll recall a briefing midstream during the development from last fall. That project is just now launched. Austin will give that update. And just as a reminder, the renewable energy credits are an attribute of our renewable energy portfolio that has value to us and also has value to many of our customers as they seek to manage their sustainability profile. So Austin, take it away. Thanks.
Hey, good morning. As to mention, Austin Martinez. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk about this recently launched product. Let's start with why we explored this solution. So like OPPD, many of our customers are committing to environmental sustainability goals and reducing their carbon footprint. They have asked us in the past for a solution, a renewable energy credit solution that meets their needs, and we listen. So this product is really an opportunity for us to further that relationship that we have with those customers, while at the same time also supporting our own goals and reducing our own carbon footprint. So if you could advance to the next slide, kind of a look ahead. So we're approaching this product in a phased launch. Phase one had launched on February 1st. We are focusing on the large commercial and industrial customers within this first phase of the launch. Those C&I customers really allows us to focus on a smaller segment of customers that we anticipate representing probably a large portion of customers that are going to be interested in this solution. As we put a bow on this launch and the aftercare that we're going to be providing it to making sure that we're operationally efficient and effective here, we'll begin to explore the expansion of the offering potentially to small to medium-sized business customers along with the residential group as well. So as we approach that piece, it's important to call out that's going to take a project level commitment as well, and along with alignment on what that product offering is going to look like. So project team, timeline, and along with market research to accurately define and project what that sale volume could look like. And then moving out of phase two and into phase three, once we finish that phase two, there's also an opportunity for us to explore selling renewable energy credits to customers not within our service territory. So while this is a great fit for OPPD for our customers, it's important to call out that this isn't the only sustainability offering that we could offer customers. There's a pretty big space here. So OPPD is going to be working cross-functional teams to identify other opportunities that exist for us to meet those customers' needs. Go to the next slide, please. So important phase one launch, it's important to call out some key attributes for you to be aware of as we move forward. First, I'll touch on the online registry. So an online registry is really industry best practice within this rec market. It allows us to be operationally efficient and effective, along with addressing some auditing controls and mitigating risk. For program reporting, OPPD will be tracking product performance monthly and including it within the SD7 report that you received today. For pricing and revenue, so the project team, we worked with our pricing and rates group to identify the 2024 offering price. We also worked with the Brattle group to help us define and develop that pricing framework that we'll use today and moving forward. Important to call out here, the revenue earned through this program are going to be dedicated to projects which reduce OPPD's carbon emissions, which is in full alignment with Resolution 5578. And for the sales process. So within phase one, as I mentioned, commercial industrial customers, those customers are going to be allowed to offset their usage up to 100% within 10% increments. The senior account executive teams will be working with their customers to acquire that enrollment. And for internal governance, as I mentioned, revenue earned is going to be used for projects in alignment with 5578. So an internal environmental commodities advisory board is established to make sure that we are adhering to those rules and the management of funds. Okay, so I mentioned 5578 a few times. Felt it would be important to share that language with you right now. So 5578 was approved in 2006, authorizes OPPD to sell renewable energy credits, and the revenues earned need to be used for energy efficiency and conservation projects. So we're going to make sure that we're in adherence to that resolution. And then I also wanted to call out a couple of the strategic directives that we feel this product primarily supports. So you look at SD5 and the customer satisfaction. As I mentioned, customers have asked us for a solution that meets their needs in this space, and we aim to do that with this. For strategic directive 7, as long as we are following within 5578 and the regulations behind it, we are going to be supportive of SD7. And for strategic directive 11, this is a tool that our economic development team can have in their bag when they're having conversations with prospective customers who are looking for solutions that meet their needs in this space.
Question. So the revenues, that will be in a separate line item so that it will show up in the corporate operating plan as a separate line item. This was a question we had when we had another program that just kind of went into the general budget and there was no way to track where those funds were being used.
Yeah, fantastic question. We have created general ledger accounts that can make sure that the revenue coming in is separate. And so the tracking of in and out will be done specifically on the rec program.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, basically the last slide here. So we were originally expecting to share this with you last month prior to the storm. So I'm about 2 weeks late in sharing with you about this launch. So many of these have been completed, but some are still in progress. They'll be ongoing. So the launch configuration, we have confirmed our procedures. We've identified roles and responsibilities of the players that are going to be involved in executing this product. Internal training has been performed. Our sales team is aware and understand how to sell and manage and discuss this. We've also provided communications and training to the customer groups, customer facing groups like our customer care representatives to know how to make sure that they're accurately describing and providing customers with the right information. Marketing really is going to be grassroots at this time. It's phase 1. Our commercial industrial customers, our senior account executives have a fantastic relationship with those groups. So they're going to be working one-on-one with their customers to further define and understand what their needs are and provide them with the solution as it's appropriate. And finally, communications. So we've established a communications plan to make sure that we're updating and informing internal and external stakeholders when it's appropriate and make sure we're being transparent as we move forward on the product performance. And that's all I have for you this morning. Questions?
Specifically on the last item on communications, will this imply any other changes in the way we report about our energy generation if we are selling the RECs? Does that adjust anything about how we're communicating our broad portfolio or carbon emissions?
It does not change any of our current generates scopes 1, 2.
I think the question is the way we talk about our renewable energy as a percentage of retail sales will have to change the way we report that. The way language we use, words matter. I think it's important in order for us to keep with the intent of renewable energy credits to not having double counting, not creating that confusion. So we are altering the way in which I will be reporting, for example, in my president's report, the way this goes out.
Great, appreciate the clarification on that.
Any other questions?
We use the term REC quite a lot through here, but that is used differently in different places. Can you help us define what is it that generates a REC in the term that we are specifically referring to now?
Sure. The renewable energy credit represents 1 megawatt hour of the renewable energy that's been generated.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone.
That's all CP&E has, unless there's any other question.
Great, thanks very much. Yeah, so we have lunch scheduled after CPE. We are a little bit early. I guess, Director Core, back to you on systems. Do you want to go through a couple of these items, continue going, and then we can break for lunch in a little while? How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Great, systems it is then.
Systems met on January 31st. Yep.
Apologies, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron. Systems met on January 31st. We're gonna go over items 2, 3, and 5 that are on the agenda in further detail in a minute. For item 4, the committee charter, we did an annual committee charter review. There weren't any changes. And for item 6, the board work plan, we reviewed the current board work plan and there were no changes to that. So to start, we have Arlo Christensen, the Director of Safety, Training, and Health.
Good morning. This is the SD6 monitoring report. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Arlo Christensen, Director of Safety, Training, and Health. Slide, please. There it is. This slide represents the language out of SD6. So in summary, OPPD shall be recognized as a leader in safety. Some of those long-term goals, we want to reduce the DART rate to 0.50 or below, as measured by the industry performance metrics, and also reduce the PBIR rate to 4.0 or below, as measured by the industry performance metrics. Next slide, please. These are the definitions and how those rates are calculated. So days away, restricted, or transferred is a DART, and that rate is calculated by multiplying the number of DART cases times 200,000 divided by the hours worked. And PVIR would be preventable vehicle incident rate. And that rate is calculated by the number of PVIR cases times 1 million divided by the miles driven. Slide. So being recognized as leader in safety, in 2023, OPPD was given the Safety Award of Excellence by the American Public Power Association. It was recognized by the National Safety Council as one of Nebraska's safest companies. Slide. As for reducing the DART rate to less than 0.5, we did end the year at just above that goal at 0.52. All things considered, we are calling 2023 one of our safest years on records. And some of the reason behind that is if you dig into the details, we feel 2023 was more successful in regards to employee safety. A few examples I'll give you, one of which you can see on this slide. 2016, we were slightly under that 0.50 target. So we did have a lower DART rate. But that year, most of those cases, those injuries were actually days away cases. So that resulted in about 478 days away. So employees being gone for work compared to 2023 is about 183. So very significant difference when you compare those numbers. And then over that same period of time, we've seen workers' compensation costs drastically decrease. So that's one of the reasons, or a couple of the reasons that we've termed 2023 as our safest year on record. Over time, we can attribute a lot of the success to the safety and technical training, as well as the human performance improvement programs that we have. But you have to give a lot of recognition to the employees that go out, utilize those skills, and actually work to make the workplace a safer place for themselves. Next slide.
Better equipment is helping too at all, or is it just a combination of things, I guess? Is it?
Yeah, it's a combination. I could sit here and talk to you for about an hour on all those things, but there is a combination. We have tool committees that are always looking at better tools to perform jobs for as far as ergonomics and things of that nature. So there's a lot that goes into it. Just would take a long time to discuss all those details. This slide represents the PVIR rate. As you can see, we've been under that target for the past 8 years. And there's always room for improvement. But we do need to realize that driving is probably the most dangerous task our employees do on a regular basis. The fact that this rate's been below that target for several years just demonstrates the commitment our drivers have, not only their personal safety, but also that to the public who they share the road with. So once again, continued success is really the employees that are going out in the field and commit to driver safety. But we also reinforce it through policies and procedures such as our 360 walk around, backing people up, things of that nature. So driver safety is also one of those things that we discuss on a regular basis and toolbox talks, safety bulletins. So it's never really a stagnant topic. It's talked about all throughout the year. And just as a point of reference, both of the DART rate and the PBI rate are, they're best in class. They're top quartile. So they're not average goals that we're trying to achieve. So they're really great goals to strive for. Next slide, please. The last thing I'll mention, because it does impact everything that we've just talked about, is psychological safety. OPPD has made a commitment to foster psychological safety in the working environment. And while it continues to grow, I believe that we currently have a strong culture of psychological safety. We continue to strengthen that through things such as some of the changes we made in 2023 was we committed to every employee that comes into the organization. We put them through psychological safety training when they go to new employee orientation. And then as this slide represents, we've put it on the safety meeting briefing. So it's become a core part of our everyday business.
And actually, Carlo, we share this when we're out doing speaking engagements as well, so that we can pass on best practices to the community, and they love that.
Yeah, and the slide actually will have a note where it gives everybody some details to walk through this slide as they're talking about psychological safety. So once again, I think we're strong. We obviously have some room to improve, always have room to improve, but I believe we do have a good culture of psychological safety here at OPPD.
If I may maybe supplement this piece, it's really, really, really important. We talk about this every month, but I will give you a great example that didn't come up here. 3 weeks ago or so, time flies, when we had the ice storm, we're all working around the clock to make sure that we can bring all of our units back online. During that time, it was discovered that we had quite a bit of steam coming out of one of the roof areas in our Nebraska City Station. And that steam typically just evaporates. Well, when it's -40, it didn't evaporate. It just turned into ice immediately. We had a very thick layer of ice on top of a roof that at some point started to present some structural hazards. We're all working really hard, really fast to bring the units back online as fast as we possibly can. And it was fantastic to hear. And this happened the day of the board meeting, actually, right? A few hours before the board meeting, I get a call, Troy Vice engaged. And our own employees, frontline employees, raised their hands and said, stop the work. This is not safe. And the courage that it takes for someone to say, it doesn't really matter where you are in the organization. You don't need to be the CEO or the manager or the supervisor. You raise your hand, you stop the work because this doesn't feel safe. And sure enough, we sent it back to the engineers to do all the analysis, and it was not a safe environment. We were able to move employees off onto scaffolding to continue to do the work. But that is a fantastic example in my mind. I was so proud when I heard that the work had been stopped. We figure out who were the individuals who stopped that work and commend them for doing that. But I think that's part of that psychological safety, knowing that you will not be penalized, even if that had not been the case, even if it was a safe environment to work on. The fact that someone had the courage and felt safe in the culture to say, this doesn't feel safe. There are people's lives at risk. Let's stop. Let's pause. And we were able to safely remove all the ice and remove the hazard. But yeah, it's just a good example of that.
That's actually a great example too, because really that's what impacts organization the most when it comes to psychological safety is how the management reacts when something like that comes up. And I can tell you all three levels, my level, the vice president, Javier, we was all very supportive, and I think it sent a great message to the organization as far as, next time a situation like this arises, we need to act accordingly in the same manners. Thanks for bringing that up here. Next slide, and I'll turn it back over to you, Director.
Anybody have anything else?
I just want you to highlight how many miles we drive every year.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, we worked about 3.8 million hours last year, and we drive on average about 5.5 million miles, so.
And I think at the time of our systems meeting, we had zero vehicle accidents for a couple months
We went about-
running.
We went about 3 months without a preventable
Yeah.
vehicle incident, which is great, because like I said, those are top quartile numbers. They're not easy targets to achieve, and doing that for 8 years, like I said, it just goes back to the commitment.
I believe it was November, December, and January of 2024.
Yeah, dangerous months to drive. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to Nuclear Oversight Committee quarterly report.
Good morning, Tim Ewing, Senior Director of Decommissioning for Fort Calhoun Station. We can go to the next slide. We'll talk through the data sheet as we go through the pictures. So every time I was here in 2023, I talked about the reactor vessel. I thought we'd start 2024 off with that as well, but this is the last time I'm going to talk about it. And we need to talk about it now, since the last time I was here, we completed a major milestone by completing segmentation and disposal of that unit. So the picture on the left is the last piece coming out, what we refer to as the hemispherical bottom head. The HBH is what we really call it. And then the picture on the right shows where the reactor was. So you can clearly see down in the deep hole during operation, completely removed at this point. We can go to the next slide, please.
What was the weight of the reactor? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't recall it this time.
Very heavy, but
It was a lot.
lodging it was a big deal.
Just this piece was 100,000 pounds, give or take. Next slide, please. And then this just kind of shows the beginning and the end of the journey for that piece. So the picture on the left shows that HBH on the transport trailer that took it up to the rail loading area on site. And it's inside that structure that we built outside of containment, so we would have a weatherproof means to move things in and out of containment. And then the picture on the right shows that unit with some additional coverings over it as it's being unloaded in Utah for its final disposal. And it mentioned it does weigh about 100,000 pounds. I don't think that includes all the chains that were holding it down, but a pretty serious package to move across the country. What that has allowed is for us to move on to the next phase, and what I'm going to talk to you about every time I come in 2024 is the removal of components from inside of containment. So we can go to the next slide, please. So what you're seeing here is still inside that structure, but it's getting the first steam generator, and we have 2 of those out of containment. So the hole into containment through the side of the wall is where we've been moving everything in and out this entire time. What you can see behind that on the left is the start of going through the next wall, which is about 3 or 4 foot in from the exterior wall. And then you see the picture on the right, which is further along. It exposes that steam generator so we can remove it. And into that picture, we're removing the beam that's in the middle of that steam generator. That thing weighs about 500,000 pounds. So it also is pretty significant. By the time I come back in May, I expect that we'll have that first steam generator out, not sent off for disposal yet necessarily, but at least out of containment. And then that allows us to just continue working through. The other one's farther inside, so a lot of work to get to it. So that'll be throughout 2024. We'll be working on removing items from inside of containment. The last item that was on the data sheet, I don't have any pictures for, but it's around the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and I have some updates from what was submitted. The license termination plan, which I like to refer to as our agreement with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission on how we're going to approve the site, is ready for release for unrestricted use, was approved. That is a significant milestone for us as well. It took about 2 years to work through that process. And that helps us because now we know that all the work that we have done was the work that needed to be done. and we know clearly what we need to do going forward. But since that was a 2-year process, we've been working on already gathering up the paperwork and doing all the work that we need to do to start to actually get the license terminated. So our first package, which we refer to as phase 1, is in final draft form. For some context, that document is about 3,700 pages long. So, and it's one of probably 4 or 5 packages that will go in between now and the end of the project. As part of that, the process, before we submit the first package, we will have a formal meeting with the NRC. We're working on setting up that date, but we expect that to be soon. And sitting in that package now allows the NRC to start reviewing it as opposed to waiting until the end and submitting 15,000 pages at the end of the project. The other thing that was on the data sheet was around the next on-site inspection. That's been moved out into March, and that is for scheduling efficiency, effectively is what it is. That week, we expect the contractor that the NRC uses to do independent surveys, to be there doing independent surveys while we're doing surveys, and then that allows the NRC to come on and observe all of that work going on. It's that strong independent oversight that they continue to provide of the project. And that is the end of my report, pending questions. Yes.
Great work there. All of this steam generator waste, then, is that contaminated waste? Is that radioactive waste as well?
Yes, all the material that's coming out of containment will be disposed of as radiological material, and all of it is scheduled to go to Utah.
So we're not done with just getting the reactor out doesn't relieve us of the.
That's absolutely right. That was certainly a higher radiological constituent for that. But for the rest of the project, we'll use the same types of controls we use for it to ensure that it's done safely.
Very good, thank you.
Yes.
At one of the meetings that I sat in on probably sometime last year, remember your consultant saying, be prepared for unexpected things. You think, oh, we've almost reached the end. It's all smooth sailing. So these plans that you have submitted is it pretty, does it look fairly smooth? I mean, it's like you open that thing and it's, oh my goodness, what are you gonna find? And it's like, what's in the basement kind of.
Yeah, I would answer that like this. There were no surprises in what was approved. And we were holding meetings with the NRC throughout this 2-year period. It's not like we submitted it and all of a sudden it came back. And the risk of the project from a cost, schedule, radiological has continued to go down, moving the fuel, moving the reactor vessel internals, moving the vessel. There is still the potential for discovery as we do this. As we do all of those surveys that are necessary to prove to ourselves we can release the site, there is the potential you could find something that would need to be remediated, and that's exactly what we would do. But the risk of discovery is less now than it was in December.
Thank you.
You mentioned risk on cost, schedule, radiological. How about on cost and schedule? Where are we on each of those 2 major metrics?
So for schedule, we expect to be at substantial completion in the 3rd quarter of 2026, which is where we've been for the last couple of updates. And on the cost standpoint, we still expect to come in at the original cost estimate or under it.
So generally, you would call that on time and on budget as far as what we had
I
projected?
would call it on budget, certainly. On time from the last couple of updates, there has been some movement since we started in 2019.
Sounds good. Thanks very much.
On time, it'll be 2026. He measures it by weeks and it may be a little bit late.
Based on previous reports, yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Got it. Terrific. We're going to take a break here now. The next item's a little longer, and I think we're going to take a lunch break now until 12:10. We'll be back. So thanks very much, everyone. See you in a little while. Welcome back, everyone. After our lunch break, the time is now 12:11 p.m. We were in the middle of the systems committee when we took a break, and we'll continue there. Director Core, next item, back to you.
I can do an introduction.
Yeah, well, if you would, I was trying to get the agenda. Go ahead.
Yeah, very good, sir. Thank you. So Dan Lenihan here is our Director of Transmission and Distribution Planning. And Dan's going to go over what we're calling our integrated distribution plan. And so there's a strong correlation with SD9, which is our integrated system plan. But in all practical measures, this is a part of our enhanced resolution and focus to create go forward clarity with how our system will change over the future and why it will change the way it will change, and how the organization can really start to process that in more clear ways with higher resolution. So excited to have Dan here speak about this. And we also have our manager, Mark Jubilisco, in the back of the room, who's been fantastic in advancing this work forward. So, Dan, I'll turn it over, sir.
All right, thanks, Brad. So again, I'm Dan Linehan, Director of our Transmission and Distribution Planning Group here at OPPD, and I get to present on this integrated distribution planning topic today. So just a brief agenda of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to hit a little bit of background of how we arrived at the conclusion to do this integrated distribution plan now. But the bulk of the agenda is really going to be going over the scope of what this integrated distribution planning effort's all about, the phased approach we're going to take, and what we're going to come out of the gate in phase one with our highlights. And then I'll end with some next steps and timeline. Go to the next slide. So starting off with the background. Before I jump into kind of the scope of what an integrated distribution planning effort is all about, I just want to briefly touch on some background. And what I wanted to hit on is really the power system's going through some of the biggest transformational changes it's ever gone through in its history. And that's due to the integration of a lot of new technologies. So to help illustrate what I mean by that, I got a couple graphics on the right-hand side of the slide up here. So the graphic in the upper right shows what I would call a traditional power system model. And it all starts off with a large conventional power plant that can produce power to serve tens of thousands of homes. That's connected to the very large power lines, which are called our transmission network, which move power over very long distances. It's what connects cities to cities and states to states together. And from there, power is stepped down to lower voltage power lines on our distribution system, which are those smaller power lines that have a direct connection to our end use customers. And so power traditionally flows from the large power plant to the energy delivery system to the end use customer. So what technologies are really kind of changing that model and being integrated into that model? Well, the graphic on the lower right illustrates some of those new technologies that are really necessitating our need to change the way we plan and operate the power system. So again, starting on the left-hand side there on that bottom graphic, you see still conventional large power plants being added to the high voltage transmission system. Also adding new technology in the form of renewable energy, large-scale solar plants, wind plants, and battery storage systems. And that's fundamentally starting to change the way that the power system is operated on the high voltage transmission side. And we've talked a lot about these changes recently in front of the board with our Power with Purpose efforts and near-term generation efforts. And that's taken a tremendous amount of focus from our planning groups to prepare for all that. But there's also been some transformational technology changes occurring on the distribution side and our end use customer side. So you can focus your attention on the far right-hand side of that graphic below. So things such as electric vehicle integration, distributed energy resources like rooftop solar, more intelligent and automated and controllable devices out on the distribution grid are starting to advance and become more prevalent. So really what this integrated distribution planning effort is all about is merging our traditional distribution planning practices for capacity planning for load growth with the integration of those new technologies at our customer end use side and out on the distribution grid. And so if you go to the next slide. So these new technologies are obviously occurring in our area somewhat, but they're occurring at other areas in the country a lot faster than they're occurring here. So this slide right here is really a snapshot in time of what the industry looks like in our country for utilities and states that are maybe more mature in their integrated distribution planning efforts. And so from this snapshot, we were able to talk to other utilities that have done integrated distribution plans and really take the learnings and their scopes and merge it into what I'm going to talk to you about here today on our integrated distribution plan. So we reached out to these utilities, got a lot of great information, but one of the other reasons I wanted to show this map is in the middle, Nebraska is gray, which means there's no publicly available for integrated distribution planning. So as part of this effort, we really want to put the state of Nebraska on the map for doing integrated distribution planning and doing it well. So if you go to the next slide. Now I'm going to get into the overview, high-level scope of what this integrated distribution planning effort is all about. A lot of information on the slide. I'm not going to read it all, but 4, 5, 6 months down the road, if you wanted a one-slide executive summary when you're thinking about this topic to go back and say, what is this all about? This would be the one slide I point you to here. There are a couple things I do want to point out on this slide, though, while we're at it. It's the value proposition and the goals of this effort. So the value proposition, I'm just going to actually read. So developing an integrated distribution plan will enable OPPD to evolve from traditional planning methodologies to processes and systems that help enable OPPD's Powering the Future 2050 goals of perfect power, customer freedom, and cleaner world. And for those in the general public that aren't familiar with our Powering the Future 2050 goals, those are widely publicized on our public website, oppdcommunityconnect.com, if people want to learn more about those. But how those tie specifically to the goals of this integrated distribution planning effort, I just wanted to read those off quickly as well. So goal number one is really to create organizational alignment and public awareness for all the things that we are doing and have been doing to prepare for this new technology coming on the distribution system. So we've done a lot of great work, but we really haven't had a great vehicle to publicize and promote that and integrate it all under one spot. So we're excited that this integrated distribution plan is going to be that vehicle for us, not to only bring the organization along with how we're planning for the system, but to create that public awareness as well. We want to update and modernize our standards and valuation framework for integrating the new technologies such as electric vehicles and distributed energy resources. We want to essentially modernize the way we do distribution load forecasting, and I got a slide later where I'll get into that some more. We want to integrate a modernized distributed device deployment strategy. So what's that? An example of this would be advanced metering infrastructure, and you've heard a lot about that recently, but there's so many more modernized grid devices that we can integrate into our system. So putting those all together and codifying that in this plan will be real important for us. And ultimately, we want to take all this information and codify it in one long-range integrated distribution plan. So with that, on the goals and the high-level scope, I think we'll go to the next slide here. So this is going to be a pretty significant effort. And because of that, we are going to take a phased approach with how we tackle it. And it's really broken apart into two main phases. Phase one, which will occur during this year, is really our initial effort to create a foundational document. So it's really going to be that current state of what our distribution system looks like, how we plan for it today, and what we've been doing to prepare for some of the transformation technologies that we're seeing integrate into our system. So we've already done a lot of great work, and we're going to document that in this phase one. In addition, in phase one, we're going to do a gap analysis to identify, are there certain technologies or transformations that we haven't prepared for really at all or much yet? So we're going to identify those gaps and challenges in phase one. Phase two, which will take place in 2025, is really we're going to focus on those gaps and challenges identified in phase one and flesh out strategies for those integrations of those technologies in the phase two. Then after that, in around 2026, we're going to synthesize and integrate the phase one and phase two stuff together in an integrated distribution planning document for publication. And then there'll be some periodic refresh of this process as well as new strategies need to be developed or certain milestones are met in the plan. As I mentioned, this is going to be a significant effort. It's going to take a lot of internal staff time to work through. We're also going to leverage our membership and industry groups, which we're pretty good at doing. And we also plan to onboard a consultant who has experience in integrated distribution planning efforts to help us with this as well. So I think we can move on to the next slide here. So far in this presentation, I covered the background of why we need to do this, the scope of what we're going to do at a high level and our phased approach. And I wanted to unpack in the next 4 or 5 slides some breadth and depth of some of the phase one highlights that we've actually already done to prepare for some of these technologies. And for the first time, really publicize that widely here. And the first topic I'm going to hit on is electric vehicles. And that is probably the #1 question I get externally and even internally is, what are we doing to prepare for electric vehicles on our system? We've actually been preparing for this for a while now. I'm glad to be able to publicize some of this today, but taking a snapshot of our current system makeup, electric vehicles account for less than 1% of all light duty vehicles in our service territory. So not a very high penetration rate and very negligible system impacts to our grid so far, but the penetration rates are growing and will continue to grow. So we have to get out ahead of that and plan for that. And like I said, we've actually been planning for EVs for quite a while in our system. So starting about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a partnership between our transmission and distribution planning group and our customer service group, where we developed a program called the Charge Point program. And what that was a program where we'd offer rebates to our residential customers to install level 2 charge point chargers in their home. And in exchange for the rebates, we would be able to gain access to customer charging behaviors and data so we could analyze them to see how our customers are charging their electric vehicles on our system. And the program was very successful. We had over 450 of these level 2 chargers installed. we gained a ton of great insightful data from the data we were able to evaluate. The program has since ended with the rebates, but we, like I said, got a lot of valuable insights from the data. I just want to unpack two of our insights we got, which are kind of shown on the graphics there. And this will be the first time we publicize this information in the public forum. Some of the data that we really analyzed is when are our customers plugging in their electric vehicles at different times of the day. So the graphic on the left there with the line chart shows different hours of the day of when customers are plugging in, and where the graphic peaks, customers are typically plugging in their electric vehicles around 4, 5, 6 o'clock. And unfortunately, that lines up with our system peak, but it makes sense when people get home from work, they plug in their electric vehicles. So it's not too surprising, but the data validates what we were thinking. So now that we knew kind of when customers are typically plugging in their electric vehicles, how long are they charging, or how long are they plugged in and charging? So the graphic on the right really shows that data. And this was really insightful, is that customers typically plug in around that evening peak, and they leave them plugged in mostly overnight. But the amount of charging time that they're actually doing is really only a couple hours, because they're not driving a ton during the day. So you don't need 10 hours to overcharge or charge the batteries overnight. But again, the charging is set up as soon as you plug it in, the charging starts drawing on the system. And that's usually during the first 2 hours of when they plug it in, which is during our evening peak. So the insights that we can get from this is, because the charging is only a couple hours, if we can develop some type of managed charging program, either through incentives or rate structure, to push the charging to an off-peak period, that could lessen impacts on our electric grid and defer some significant infrastructure investments. So pretty insightful data here. Some of it was maybe intuitive, but the data actually proved it out. And I'll just point out that typically we talk to utilities on the West and East Coast about things like this to gain insights. And once we talked to others about this data we had utilities from the East Coast and West Coast talking to us, wanting access to this, because this is really innovative and top-notch stuff that we did here. So I want to give a nod to the groups that set this up. If you go to the next slide, there's a couple more topics on electric vehicles I do want to hit, and one of those is industry participation. So we participate in a lot of industry forums. A couple of them I just want to call out in relationship to electric vehicles was EPRI and LPPC. So EPRI stands for Electric Power Research Institute, and it's really a major outfit in the United States that studies the integration of new technologies on the power grid. And they have an EVs to Scale 2030 effort that we're a part of, where they're trying to predict where electric vehicles are going to go across the country and where charging infrastructure is going to be needed to support it all. And we're very plugged into that effort. The other industry group we're plugged into is Large Public Power Council, which is a consortium of other large public power entities in the country. And so they have an e-mobility task force that we're heavily integrated into, that it's focusing on the integration of electric vehicles and how to plan for those appropriately as well. I think the last thing I want to mention on electric vehicles is fleet electrification. Now, as I mentioned before, we don't have a whole lot of light duty vehicles in our service territory, and we don't have a whole lot of fleet electrifications, but we do actually have one, and that's Amazon. And there's a picture of the electrified Amazon Rivian vans that you may be seeing driving around town. So they have a local electrified fleet in our service area, over 100 vans that we charge. Before they were going to connect to our grid, we had a lot of discussions with them on what the composition of your charging, how much draws is going to take. And so we work closely with them, and they charge their vehicles overnight outside of the peak to lessen the impacts on our system. And we also installed some advanced monitoring and basically similar to what we did with our charge point program, advanced metering, so we can monitor their charging behaviors to gain a lot of insight from the single electrified fleet installation on our system. And that partnership has gone real well. And we work real closely with our customer group and our economic development group to kind of predict and talk to our customers of where more of these are going to come on our system. If you were to ask me maybe what I'm more concerned with in the near term, it's not light duty residential electric vehicles. It would be more the fleet electrifications that potentially come onto our system. So really getting ahead of that and having our ears and feet to the ground of knowing when these are going to pop up is real important for us planning. I'm going to move on to the next section.
Just a quick question. The graph on page 11 that shows what time they plugged in, but does that necessarily reflect what time they started charging? Because when my car, I can plug it in, but it doesn't start charging till I tell it to charge. So is that plugged in time or is that charging time?
The graph on the left there is just when people plug in. And then the graph on the right is when they plug in, when are they charging and how long are they charging? And typically most people are as soon as the plug in, the charging starts. But there's so much sophisticated technology, you can set that to delay through various programs, an app on your phone or other controllers to do that. So that's what we're going to really look into going forward. Good question. Okay, if you want to advance it, I think one more slide or two more slides.
Dan, if I may, it is a fantastic question, Dr. Molhoff, and really important here because it's not just delaying everyone's charging, but once you get into the distribution system, you may have a lot of neighbors that are charging. So within that same neighborhood and that same transformer, I think it's important to coordinate. Not only everybody delays by 3 hours, but how do you stagger those and optimize the system even more at a more granular level? And I think that's what the dream here is for these plans to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you can only up so much that there's eventually going to need to be some upgrades. But as we kind of work in concert with our customers and what's the best solution for everyone involved, that'll be part of the phase 1 and phase 2 effort of this plan. So moving on to basically another evolving technology on the customer use side of the meter. I'm going to talk about distributed energy resources and demand side management. So distributed energy resources are probably synonymous with like your rooftop solar or in-home battery storage installations. And similar to electric vehicles in our service territory, very small penetration rates of these in our system. Less than 1% of all of our customer base has these type of installations on their system. So very small amounts and pretty negligible impacts to our distribution system. But nevertheless, the amount of requests we're getting for these are starting to increase. And you can see the amount of those requests illustrated in the graphic below. In the last couple of years, you've seen the requests really shoot up. Now that may look scary, but the scale I'll say is very small compared to our customer base. And if I threw that compared to our total customer base, it would kind of just be a dot. But we wanted to illustrate that the applications are increasing. So because of that, we have had to streamline and update our intake for how we receive applications and how we process and evaluate these installations on our grid. I think our customer group in the past has presented on how we streamlined our customer-owned generation application process, which we updated a web portal and really made it a lot easier for our customers to let us know the type of installations that they want to put on our system. And it also helps us internally track those and route those and review those in an automated fashion. The other thing that we really have to still update is how we process the numerous types of distributed energy resource installations we're getting from a system impact perspective. So we have a process today, but as more and more of these come on the grid, we have to really update and modernize and streamline that process. And talking to other utilities, one of the methodologies that they're going to is creating something called a hosting capacity analysis. And that's really where there's a methodology to evaluate the capacity on your distribution circuits and see at what penetration point do distributed energy resources start to cause issues on your distribution system. And so a graphic on the lower right-hand side there on the slide really shows what a hosting capacity analysis can look like. And that's an aerial snapshot of distribution circuits of a service area color-coded by capacity or penetration rates of concern on that utility system. So the red means distributed energy resources are already pretty prevalent in those areas, and any more are going to cause issues on the circuit. The green means we're kind of good to go. We can accommodate a lot of these, and then there's other colors that are anywhere in between. So we want to develop our own methodologies and structures for how we want to evaluate capacity on our distribution system to accommodate these, because in all honesty, the distribution system, when it was originally set up, was set up to accommodate power flows from the power plant into the end use customers. Now there's potential for the end use customers generation to push back onto the distribution system, and the system was never set up for that. So there's a lot of analysis we got to do to make sure our system can handle the likes of potentially what's coming down the road. Another customer side technology I want to talk about was demand side management. I just talk about it really quick. As we've talked about this a lot before, and this isn't anything new to OPPD, but we actually already offer a lot of demand side management programs today, such as our 467L rate rider, Cool Smart, Smart Thermostat. And when our customer group offers these products, they offer them on kind of a broad brush approach to our entire customer base. It's really targeted at reducing our overall system peak demand. But on the distribution system, kind of location matters. And if we can have a targeted approach to some of these, we may be able to mitigate growing capacity concerns on certain pockets of our distribution system. So this would be, if you've ever heard of non-traditional solution, this would be one of those non-traditional solutions, maybe potentially avoiding or deferring wires and poles installations on our system with a targeted DSM approach. So that's something we're going to flush out more in this phase one. I think the last thing I want to mention on DSM is there's a major federal policy that was enacted a couple of years ago that's still in the works, but it's going to allow the aggregation of demand side management products to be offered into wholesale energy markets. And so there's been a lot of preparation efforts across the country to prepare for something like this, including OPPD. And it's really going to evolve and impact how we operate the distribution system, because now it's going to integrate more into the wholesale market and the transmission system. So there's a huge group of internal staff working on this now at OPPD, and we're going to integrate that work into this integrated distribution plan because it's going to affect how we plan the system. So I talked a lot about that one, but I'm going to go on to the next one. On the next slide. So I've talked about evolving technologies on the customer side of the meter so far, and now I'm going to start working my way out to the grid on the evolving technologies on our distribution grid. And one of which is at the customer meter point where we interface with our customers. You've heard a lot about this already, advanced metering infrastructure, or AMI, and Aaron Smith's going to talk a lot more about this in his next presentation. So I'm not going to spend much time on this, but the reason I want to show this slide here is to set us up for proper use of advanced metering infrastructure. We have to overhaul a ton of our distribution, operational, and data management platforms. And I'm not going to run through them all, but that's a list of all of them there. Because of the overhaul that's going to be done on our distribution operational systems, it's really going to improve our distribution planning, because we're going to get way more data than we ever had on our system before to plan our distribution system going forward at a lot more granular level. So we're really excited that these platforms that we're going to put in for AMI are going to help our planning. So I think I'm just going to skip on to the next slide here, because you'll hear more about that later. I think I just have a couple slides left, but going out onto the distribution grid. So what are some evolving technologies that are going on there? First one I wanted to talk about is distribution grid scale resources. So what are those? Well, small solar farms, small battery storage facilities. These are bigger than your house rooftop solar batteries, but not as big as like the 500-acre solar farms or wind farms that go on the bulk electric system. So these are your in-betweeners. They can be used to power a few neighborhoods or a few commercial business parks. And we actually have experience with installing some of these on our system. We have a community solar farm in the 5 megawatt size up near Fort Calhoun that we put in a few years ago. We have a 1 megawatt battery storage facility we recently installed near Wheatonwater, Nebraska. And we're in discussions with Douglas County on a potential landfill solar project as well, which will interconnect our distribution system. So we've got a few of these in production already and a few more coming. We're going to gain a lot of great operational experience to look at both the benefits of these and potential challenges they can cause on our distribution system as we plan our system going forward. And from the learnings from these, we'll implement a strategy for how we want to potentially deploy these going out in the future. In addition to the distribution grid scale resources, I also want to talk about newer technology called distribution automation going out on the distribution system. So you may have heard the term smart grid thrown around. That's kind of what distribution automation is all about. It's really installing advanced communication and control technology into our distribution, basically poles and wires itself. So an example of what smart grid technology can look like is maybe using an example of an outage. Let's say a tree branch hits a power line and it causes outage to maybe about 1,000 customers. Typically today, our control center would dispatch out manually a troubleshooter to go run the line and see where the problem area is. The troubleshooter would find the problem, try and switch devices to isolate the problem and reroute power to our other customers so our crews can come in and fix and clear the tree branch and then restore power to all of our customers. We've got that process pretty down pat, and we have some of the highest reliability stats in the country, first quartile, but it's still a pretty manual process. What this distribution automation can do is add intelligent devices out on the system such that when this tree branch hits the power line, devices can pinpoint exactly where the problem is, isolate the problem, automatically reroute power to our other customers in the unaffected area, which will really greatly improve our restoration times and minimize our customer outage minutes, potentially cutting them more in half. So we're really excited about what this technology can bring. And we actually piloted some of this technology already in Northeast Omaha. And we learned a lot about what we could do with that technology there. And it proved, some pieces of it proved challenging and some pieces of it proved very beneficial. And the beneficial pieces we're starting to roll out to our more rural areas as communication systems can be a bit more challenged there. So we're trying to test those in those environments. But if we had good luck there, we're going to roll this out on a more system-wide broad brush basis. And the graph on the bottom right there kind of shows the different types of devices and the 5-year rollout plan we're looking to do here. And that will be integrated as part of our integrated distribution plan as well. I think I just have one more slide in the highlights section here. Go forward. So the last thing I want to talk about in this IDP highlight is modernizing our distribution load forecasting process. So as I mentioned earlier, distribution load forecasting is real important. It's how we predict and plan our system for growth across our service territory. We have a pretty decent process in place today that predicts where load growth is going to go on our distribution system. It really focuses on using historical load growth regression analysis coupled with development plans in certain pockets or areas of our system. But as we start getting new technologies integrated from our customers onto the system, using a historical load growth as kind of the primary method doesn't work real well and has some shortcomings. So we need a better or evolutionary tool to kind of predict where these new technologies are going to come on our system. So as part of that, we talked to a lot of others in the industry, and one tool kept coming up as kind of the best in practice for doing the new distribution load forecasting. And that tool is called VoltSeer, and it's made by a company called Integral Analytics. And it's extremely promising, especially talking to some of the other utilities that have used this tool. What it does is it takes your corporate-wide system load forecast and applies hundreds of different micro, macro economic factors germane to your local service area, and will forecast not only load growth, but new technology penetration such as EVs and distributed energy resources on a parcel by parcel basis, which is really what we need to do distribution planning well. So we have plans to integrate this new distribution load forecasting tool into our platforms by later this year, and we're excited to see what this can bring for our future distribution load forecast. So I think with that, on the next slide, I believe I covered all the highlights I wanted to cover of what we're going to do in phase one. And I know it's a lot of information, but I was really excited to kind of unpack a lot of the good things we've already been doing and communicate that here today. So I think I just have one slide left. Immediate next steps and timeline. So reminder, we're taking a phased approach, which how we're going to do this plan over multiple years. What we're going to focus on this year is what we're calling our phase one, which is the foundational document, really documenting our current state of what we've been doing to prepare for these technologies. I hit some of that here, but we're also going to do a gap analysis of what do we need to do going forward to integrate these new technologies. We're going to onboard a consultant in first quarter of this year as the plan and really get into the meat of this work, Q2 and Q3. And then compile the plan and synthesize all the information together in phase one by the end of the year before we roll into phase two in 2025. So with that, I think that's my last slide. If you go one more. Yep.
Maybe just a brief set of closing comments before we go to questions, if that's okay. A couple of things we wanted to drive home today is one, the teams have been very focused on these technologies and the things our customers are doing as they start adopting them. We actually have a number of ways that we can go about getting that information, and we've been doing that intentionally. And so I think there's a lot of confidence right now in how we talk about the state of the system, that these issues are generally infrequent and they're hyper local. They're very, very acute, and we're able to resolve them when we find them. The second thing I'd like to recap with is you saw a lot of how we're working with customers as they start doing these things. And so there's a really powerful synergy when we see customers doing things and we come alongside them to maybe enable those things a little bit and also acquire some level of system information so that we can create the most efficient, reliable system for them as they do these things. And the third thing is we wanted to really illuminate the things that are in our heads and hearts. We need to get them out, and we need to publish them, and we need to talk about them more as an organization and with our community. And I think this tool is going to be a really effective way to do that. So thank you for letting me make those brief comments.
Questions?
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not getting away that easy.
So
Right. Come on, Matt, give me a break. You're just standing. You mentioned the hosting capacity analysis. Is that a phase 1, phase 2 type of activity? When are you expecting that type of stuff to show up in the work that we're doing?
I think what we're gonna do in phase 1 is dive into it. I do not think we will have it mature in phase 1. I really think it's more of a phase 2, but we're gonna dive into it and start to tackle it in phase 1. And we've already actually begun to as well.
Great, I'm glad to hear that. Other study work, there are currently on the order of 2,000 custom-run generation systems installed, and they're under the existing net metering policy. But as technology improves, we get to AMI, and we get to more advanced rate structures, it's going to be more important to understand the value of solar. Are we looking at a value of solar study that will help us to set up the best ways to distribute the benefits between individual benefits to customers and aggregate benefits to the utility? Is that part of this planning effort?
I'd say the focus of this planning effort is really preparing our system for how to safely and reliably integrate these technologies without causing issues on our system. So that's the primary focus. Now, there's a lot of different stacked values with getting these new technologies on our system. So I think maybe more of what you are alluding to might be more right for our integrated resource plan, which really looks at more of the value of that type of resource. But we have to figure out a way to integrate it safely into our distribution system. So that's kind of what this plan's focused, but there are going to be a lot of synergies between the integrated resource plan and our integrated distribution plan.
And can you remind us the timeline on the IRP? The last one was submitted in February 22, but dated 21. Is that right?
I believe that to be correct.
We have 5-year frequency, sir.
So then by the end of 26, we would expect the next IRP to be reaching conclusion and ready for submittal. So 25, 26 would be the timeline when IRP work would be ongoing. And we might think that value of solar study would be included during that timeline for analysis.
I think that's a reasonable thing to conclude. I guess I would maybe round this out a little more broad, where there's a lot of technologies that have value. And so we may go into a future where we're having a value of storage conversation. And so when Dan talks about these targeted solutions for isolated areas, I think I used the word hyper specific on the distribution system. The team's already got the tools they need to really make the judgment call as system planners on, can we deploy some of these things here, and can our operators operate them reliably? And so that's going on now. We wouldn't necessarily have to wait for any of that, but that IRP tends to be that broader conversation.
Great. Glad to hear it. Other prominent national cases of reevaluation of value of those types of distributed resources have not gone particularly well publicly. California having, let's call it, challenges in their policy updates in M3. So I guess I'm hopeful that we will be able to proactively come up with a phased approach to adjustment to any kind of a compensation that we might have for these distributed resources during the next IRP process to avoid a sudden and significant shift. Right or wrong, they shifted toward more focus on value of storage, as you said, but just to avoid the risk that people might suddenly have something dramatically different than what they've had in the past. So glad to hear that that will be moved forward as part of that IRP process. And then lastly, as far as technology goes, once these types of resources are out there, our ability to engage with them comes from something like a distributed energy resource management system. And I don't know if this is a question relevant to the AMI discussion we're going to have, or where between these two agenda items or future processes would we expect that something like DERMS would be available for us to engage with these new things that are coming online?
Yeah, awesome question. Unless Dan has a different take, I bet Aaron Smith will be able to hit that for us.
I was just gonna punt that to Aaron since he's up next. I got some great to say.
Sounds good. Look forward to hearing that. Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you for your question. Okay, Mr. Smith is arriving. This is a part of our 4 times a year, every quarter. We try and make this relatively large work effort visible to the board. And so Aaron's here to do the quarterly update and to answer any questions you may have to discuss what we've done and what we plan to do over the next quarter. So Aaron, thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Aaron Smith, Director of Distributed Device Strategy. I'm also the program level sponsor on the business side for our AMI ecosystem effort. take a quick look at our agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit, kind of a refresher of like an overview, what we're doing with AMI transformation, talk about some of our key program milestones. I'll talk about our customer platform vendor selection with some exciting news that we have to share there and what that's going to mean for us. We'll also talk a little bit about AMI 2.0. I know you've heard me use that term, but we're going to dig in a little deeper of kind of what that's going to mean for us. Talk about our soft launch of 10,000 meters and our some of the areas we're targeting for that and our criteria for selecting those areas. And then finally, I'll give you an update on our grant application that we submitted for a DOE Smart Grid grant as a part of their grant program. Next slide, please. So as you recall, AMI transformation, it's not just about meters. It takes this whole ecosystem of technologies that you see here on the left. And last year, 2023, was a really big year for our program. We onboarded our OPPD team. So we staffed up the AMI Accelerator team that's going to be dedicated to this effort. We've also built out the digital transformation team in Kate's area and the TS space, as well as enhanced support and added positions across several of the major impacted business units as well. We've also established our program governance and key partnerships. We have PwC or PricewaterhouseCoopers on board as our system integrator doing our technical work, and Deloitte as our business integrator doing our organizational change management, business process design, helping us with communications as well as program and project management support. We've selected vendors for our major platforms, and we'll talk more about that here in just a minute, executed vendor contracts, and completed a lot of planning. Just for some context, we developed 1,800 different functional business requirements across the program. We held over 500 workshops last year, and to date, we've analyzed and redesigned 100 business processes with a few more hundred to go. And then finally, we've also built awareness across OPPD of what we're doing, including a spotlight that we had at the State of the Utility event last fall.
Aaron, just a quick mention. You just a few minutes ago witnessed some of those design processes changing and being shared with employees during our lunchtime. So for those of you who had a chance to stop by, that's exactly the type of work happening upstairs as we speak.
Great call out. Thank you. Let's go to the next one. So a few more additional milestones that we want to call out. I mentioned the customer platform, and we'll talk a little bit more in just a minute about what that's going to mean. We've identified our pilot areas for that soft launch, and we're working now with our vendor, Lannis & Gear, on the communication network design. On the right-hand side is kind of an illustration of what that will look like when we get that finalized, of where all the meters will be, where all the collectors, where all the repeaters are, where we're going to be using cellular technology as well as part of that plan. We've completed the round one of business process design for enterprise asset management and field service, and that was the workshops that you may have witnessed upstairs is kind of the final readout of that. And then we also submitted that concept paper for the DOE grant back in January. And I'll talk a little bit more about that and how that really ties in with what Dan just talked about on the integrated distribution plan. So our platform selection is complete. The last piece of that puzzle is the customer platform. And for that, we've selected SCW, or Smart Energy Water, as our company. They're also our vendor for field service management, which provides a lot of great synergies across when we think about the tool that's managing our work, managing our customer messaging. So as we get to the point of with customers have appointments, we'll be able to maybe send notifications across in both systems talking to each other. So lots of cool things happening there. If you'll hit the next slide, please. So the customer platform, what is this going to mean? So several of these things are available today, but what we're going to get with this new modern customer platform is a much better user experience and a lot more efficiency and automation on the back end of it. And also some of the really new features I want to point out is really that modern outage map with true outage details to be able to, customers be able to click on an outage, see who's affected, look at an estimated restoration time right from the map if they want to do that. We're also building in customer preferences on how they want to be notified and what kind of channel do you want an email? Do you want a text? Would you like a banner alert within the app? Would you like an automated phone call? Customers will be able to select what makes sense for them. And if customers choose to not have notifications, they can also go to the map and see information on the outage as well if they choose not to receive, one more type of thing on their device. In addition, we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but the detailed usage information of being able to go and, look at the prior day and dig down to a 15-minute level of what your usage was is going to be really important for customers to really understand how they're using energy and ways that they can potentially save. So really, like I say, exciting stuff coming with that customer platform. More to come. We're in the design phase of that, but wanted to just kind of provide some of the highlights of what that's going to mean for us. And again, this is kind of phase one. We'll have future phases with additional advanced functionalities as well. But this is kind of some of the base that we're starting with our MVP scope for our soft launch. So if you go to the next slide, so you've heard the term, I know you've heard me mention kind of AMI 2.0, and what does that mean? Really, it's the next generation of meters. The meters that we're going with are the Landis & Gear. They're called the Ravello is the model name of those meters. And really what they provide is it's really an additional 400,000 grid sensors that we'll have out on the system that can report outages automatically, can monitor system voltages, and capture electronic waveforms at a very high resolution. And what this will do is allow us to turn that into intelligence and analytics that we can provide to our grid operators. Being able to do some advanced interruption analysis as we go. When we have an issue on the system, say like Dan's example, we have a tree branch, the meters that are closest to that will see the biggest voltage dip. So we'll actually be able to use these 400,000 meters to help us locate problems even quicker than we're able to today. So really, really, really exciting stuff. The other thing is we'll have the ability to download apps to the meters themselves, either apps from third-party partners or ones that we can develop ourselves that provide both grid and customer functionality. So it's really cool. It's almost kind of like if you think of an app store for your phone, we'll have that kind of an ecosystem for the meters themselves, which really helps us future-proof those as an investment that we see for, at least a kind of a 20-year life. And then finally, the network itself, we're using a hybrid approach. Our metropolitan areas will be a mesh IP network. And what that really means is if we lose a piece of equipment, we lose a collector where the signals are coming in, that message can hop to a different collector. It can hop through another meter to a repeater to a collector. So it's really resilient. So if any kind of piece of it goes down, there's always an alternate path to get that information back to us and utility. And then the other part of the hybrid in a lot of our rural areas, we'll be using a cellular solution, but it's really a carrier agnostic solution that can jump to the strongest signal, whatever that may be, whether it's Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, et cetera, whatever the strongest coverage in that area is, we can jump to that. So really exciting stuff to come with this technology. With this 2.0, we're really, like I say, about to really leapfrog a lot of utilities that have implemented even in the past 5 or 10 years. So kind of really good timing for what we're doing here. If you'll hit the next slide, please, we'll talk a little bit about our soft launch criteria. So as I mentioned, we've identified some areas for that. I'm not going to share those today in today's setting. We're in the process of developing our customer engagement and stakeholder engagement plans around that. And so we want to do that in the right form as opposed to show it on a screen here, but did want to provide, what are some of the things that we've looked at when in selecting these areas. Really, we were looking for both a geographic and a customer diversity. So we're looking at kind of some urban, suburban, rural areas, looking at areas where we have a lot of potential move in and move outs or turn on, turn off, so we can test that functionality within the meters. Also areas where we have mature trees and overheads, and where we'll have some system events that we can test out that functionality I was describing on kind of the fault location or the problem location as we're going through this. And then a lot of the other things that we're able to do is really around, can we gather data to help better understand it? So some of the things that we're looking at is we've included areas where we have a higher DER or rooftop solar penetration, higher EV penetrations, both at the residential level as well as some commercial charging stations. And then also some federally designated disadvantaged communities areas. And so what this will do is really that data will inform what our potential future products, services, rates, et cetera, should look like across a diverse group of customers and a diverse group of technologies that customers may have. We're also looking at some areas in our downtown area where we've got some apartment towers, and those meters are down in a basement underground. And so that'll really help us test our communication technology. We've also selected a few rural areas by talking to some of our crews down south that said, hey, we always, when we go here, we have trouble getting cell phone coverage. So we're going to hit those areas first to make sure that communication is working as we're building out that network. So that's our intent with these. Is it's a diverse area across our 13 counties to really grab the data, understand it, be able to test it, and then build out our future from that information.
How many customers are you getting involved in the soft launch?
About 10,000, a little over 10,000 customers is what we're targeting. We kind of, like I say, it's spread across kind of the metro area, some downtown, Jerktown, kind of out west, and then in our rural areas, kind of down south, and then up towards kind of our east, all the way up kind of towards Fremont. So looking at really diverse geographic area. If you go to the next slide, and we're kind of coming down to the end. So this is really exciting, this DOE grant that we submitted in January. And what we're really including in this grant scope is really our full rollout beyond the soft launch. So it's kind of, we've got our 10,000 in the soft launch, kind of the rest of the 390,000 AMI 2.0 meters are included in that scope, as well as the advanced distribution management system, and including with that a DERMS, or the distributed energy resource management, that enterprise DERMS system that will allow us to have that visibility into devices behind the meter, potentially to control those one day or have those be a part of programs as we're going. So that we have that on our roadmap. It's just kind of beyond our MVP. It's kind of the next phase of the program, is that full ADMS as well as the DERMS piece. And again, with this grant money, we're targeting that really advanced functionality. That's really what the DOE is interested in. And so this provides a great opportunity. And so that's where that really ties in with the grid monitoring control devices. Dan kind of teed that up with our distribution automation efforts. We also have some other communication devices that can clip on the line, get current and voltage readings. They see outages, they see faults, and can report back. Some really cool things is we have ones that can go in like underground switches, so like the big square boxes that you see kind of on the corners. A lot of times when we get a fault on the underground, because you can't see it, it can be very hard to locate, and that can take hours and hours sometimes to find those. With these devices, they're able to kind of see that fault, communicate and back of kind of where they think it is. And so we'd be able to send our crews kind of right to where we think the problem is first on that underground, where it can kind of be hidden and potentially save, hours and hours of outage time for our customers. So really, really exciting stuff in that space. We have the opportunity to get up to 50 million in available funds from the DOE. And again, with that scope I described of kind of the full rollout of the 390 and the other technologies, OPPD would kind of be responsible for 90 million of it. And then we'd get that 50 million benefit from the DOE to really help accelerate the deployment that Dan laid out in our integrated distribution plan. And that's why our integrated distribution plan is so important. And this is an opportunity that will really help us accelerate that effort. So the full application is due in May, and then we're expected to receive a decision later this year in the fall timeframe. So really, really exciting stuff there.
Aaron, if you don't mind, can I make a brief?
Yeah, absolutely.
These grants are laborious, they're hard to get. You all followed a lot of that. There's a lot of money out there, but it doesn't mean it's easy. We feel like there's a unique advantage for us because what we're effectively doing is a wholesale rip and replace of large, complex, and integrated systems. And while that's difficult, the advantage for us is that we do a lot in a systemic and integrated way all at once. So we take this huge step, we've talked about that, we take this huge step all at once. And part of the reason we feel like we're an attractive candidate for this is because we're going to go so far on a capability perspective with AMI 2.0. We're trying to make sure that the DOE really sees this for what it is, which is what we think is a very unique opportunity to move the industry forward and to enable some of these customer choice things that we want and more perfect power. And so I don't think we're an average competitor for this. So sorry, Carissa and Aaron, like, I think we're a really strong candidate and we want to make sure that that shows up in our application to the fullest extent possible. So I'm excited.
If you'll go to the next slide, this is kind of our last content slide here, kind of talking about the next step. So our design and execution work continues across those 6 major platforms that you saw, our newest one being customer platform. That work is ongoing and you witnessed that upstairs. So the team's working very, very hard on that. We're also, as Brad nodded to, working on that full DOE application, which is even the initial application was quite a bit of work to put all the information together. Lots of community benefits included and it's kind of a very broad scope. So we're working hard on that for May. And then our next quarterly update will also be in May. We're planning for, so as Brad mentioned, we'll come once a quarter. So we'll be back again in May to provide an additional program update. But kind of in summary, I think we're in a really good space. 2023 was a big year for the effort. We know this year is going to be even bigger and even more challenging as we go, but we've got our team now in place. And our partners in place, our vendors in place, and we're ready to really just move on down the road and attack it. So I'd be happy to take any questions if there are some.
Really exciting thing here, Aaron. Just a comment. If you don't feel the excitement here, it's gigantic. I would say between the integrated distribution plan, what AMI, we're doing with AMI and the ecosystem we're operating, my perspective is it's almost as, if not bigger in magnitude to the power generation stations we're building, the high voltage transmission infrastructure we're putting in place. This is a change that we haven't seen in decades. We're seeing it all at once. And so I want to commend you, Aaron, for leading the team and Brad for helping coordinate these. It's a lot of work. We're completing a lot of work today, but there's a lot more to be done. When this is all done, a customer in 2030 is not going to recognize the OPPD we will have in 2030 versus the one that we have today. It's that big change that we're planning here, all positive. Really exciting.
I had asked a question earlier about the DERMS, and I apologize for not having looked at detail of the slides enough ahead of time to know that was coming. So thank you for proactively answering that question for me. I agree. Yeah, strong support for this. During the SD7 monitoring report last October, there was a specific bullet that indicated the advanced feasibility study on distributed energy resources was not planned to be conducted in 2024. So, and I had comments at the time. I'm very glad to hear that we are moving forward on both of these last 2 initiatives to advance things with AMI early deployment. That was a previous item that we had talked about. Thank you for advancing some of that so that the early 10,000 meters can get going and we can learn from those. And then coupling this with the distribution planning. This is all great. Very pleased to hear all of this. I agree with Javier that this is at least as important as other efforts that we have ongoing because of the rapid changes that we are seeing in technology, the broad popularity of the types of things that customers want to be adopting, and the potential for how they will interact with our existing and pending future system upgrades. So yeah, again, very strongly supportive of everything that's going on here. And as we look forward, if there's anything else that the board needs to do in order to support these efforts, please let us know. I'll let others speak for themselves on that when it comes to it in funding or resources availability. This is very strong support for me for all of this. So thank you to everybody who's working on this.
Aaron, the pilot program, that will be voluntary. Will people sign up for that, or how are you selecting those customers?
Yeah, so with those, we kind of selected areas based on those criteria. So those will be kind of our first group of folks. So it's really everyone's going to get the new meters eventually. This is just our first 10,000 out of the 400,000. So it's kind of, they'll receive some communications on what we're doing, what is this going to mean, what are the advantages of having it, and that's going to be part of all of our engagement plan. But it's not an opt or an opt-in at this point. We've selected the areas to apply.
So you'd rather we not volunteer individually?
We do have opportunities. We do have some opportunities to do that if, for example, if you as.
Can I opt into that?
Let you do that, we can look at that through using kind of some of the cellular technology until the networks there. So we do have some of those options, but in general, we wanted to try to get some areas in clusters.
Because I did have some rural customers that talked to me that were interested and I've already forwarded their information they have to you. So,
We're getting a lot of great interest.
good.
Yeah, it is good.
That is good because I was kind of expecting pushback.
My suspicion is we may have to be a bit selective in the early days, and then,
Perfect.
you know, Aaron's kind of approaching this from a system deployment, kind of where are the areas in the system we need to prove that the technology is reliable? And then there's a huge piece of this with Mr. McAreavy and Ms. Olson on how are we going to talk to customers about this? And we'll bring some of that information back a little bit later, but that'll kind of round out the discussion. I think it's a meaningful.
Thank you.
Excitement's fun to see. Give it to me. It's really yeah.
Thanks, Aaron. Shane, are you doing the?
I am.
Awesome.
As Tim alluded to, I'm gonna spend money instead of the continued awesome future look talk today.
Just clarifying the agenda.
Yes. No, appreciate the time today. Back here again to speak, we do have a contract out for board approval for some 15 kV metal-clad switchgear and the enclosure. So this is for some new distribution equipment for a new transformer that's being added in Blair, Nebraska. So as we continue to support our customer load growth, not just in Omaha, but all across our communities. This switchgear, as we discussed previously in different board actions, it does house all the circuit breaker protection relays that really protect those distribution transformers and the grid in the event of fault disturbances. This one's a little bit different than last month's in that we're adding a whole new building as well for all this new equipment, all these new distribution circuits that'll be supporting the growing Blair community. On top of that, you know, the enclosure itself, the reason we're procuring now is just since it wasn't there, they provide the facility to keep the switchgear out of the elements and for a safe work environment for our electricians and technicians to work on them, operate and maintain them as time goes on. We did receive 4 proposals, 2 of which were deemed legally non-responsive, primarily for price adjustment policies. We continue to see some of those supply chain issues pop up in these contract proposals. Additionally, all 4 were technically non-responsive. A lot of that was due to lead time as well as just some missing components of those proposals as well. So for this one, the board action that we're asking for today is based on that legal and technical review to allow the district to reject all bids and negotiate. You know, our intention is to try to, again, lock in a firm price based on our normal approach with this type of equipment and as a means to negotiate to try to find that better way to bring the lead time back within the project estimated schedule. And one thing I didn't mention, but the engineer's estimate of this was 1.7 million. The bids we did receive were right within that range. So, you know, we're still expecting to hit that price point that's within the range of expected for engineer's estimate. And thank you, Aaron. We do have, again, the pictures of what these pieces of equipment would look like. So any questions?
Do you go back to all 4?
Good question. Yeah, typically we do not. In this case, there's 2 of these vendors that we work with very, very regularly, and we have similar contracts we procured with them recently. So we would go back to those 2 primarily. And obviously we work with our supply chain group very closely on this and their category managers as they maintain a lot of those relationships for helping us identify, you know, different ways that we can continue to look at resourcing these given the market constraints that are continuing to happen. Okay. Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all systems heads.
Great. Thanks very much. Next up is the confirmation of the board meeting agenda for Thursday. So As per usual, everything is listed on the consent item list now. Do any directors request to move any of the items from the consent agenda to the action item?
I think item 9.
Item 9, the appointment of Vice President for Safety and Facilities. Sounds good.
Chance to talk to them.
Great. Appreciate it. Any other items, or are we good on the other 3 being included on consent? Right. Sounds good. Next, we have a review of the board work plan. And yeah, we can see things here. Do any of the chairs of the committees have anything they'd like to share about updates on the board work plan?
On behalf of governance, I'd like to put in, need to work on the audit subcommittee. At some point.
Great. Yep, and we talked about that one, so we'll get that included with the intention of that being conducted during the board governance workshop.
And that's the one in there, right? That's the third one.
Yes, that seems right.
That seems all inclusive. Yeah.
And governance workshop. Good. Great, on the list. Other committees? Matt, do you have anything to share on behalf of either of the 2 that you're standing for?
I do not. No, no, thank you.
Sounds good. We'll continue on those items as planned and continue the work in the committees and at the board, full board as appropriate. Great. Last item for today is an update item on new generation and transmission, and who's going to be providing that update? There we go. Megan.
Just a quick opening comment. You'll see this section of our content really enlarge this week. And so we've got some exciting new things. And as we go through the discussion, you'll see various leaders working on really large, unique projects all along the bulk electric system. And so for those at home, and I'd offer to the board as well, think about the magnitude of all this work and the speed in which this work is occurring and how the teams are having to stay integrated. It's really been remarkable. And again, I want to just recognize you and the others that'll come behind you.
Also, just one quick note, but I think it's important to recognize that the terminology we've been evolving. We all still remember the term power with purpose. We use that term to refer to a certain group of projects. And then we used near-term generation to refer to another set of projects. That started to become a little bit confusing, to say the least. So we have decided to separate things. This is new generation. It's not near term. Some of this is going to take years and maybe not necessarily near term, but this is going to share information about new generation versus existing generation and transmission. So it's a subtle but important change in terms and how we're going to report these back to the board on all the new and exciting projects we have going on. Megan.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Megan Walker. I'm the manager of construction management within our utility operations division. Today, I'll be providing an update on our Standing Bear Lake and Turtle Creek stations, and I'll turn it over to Joe Lang for some additional updates. I believe Scott Edom as well. Next slide, please. Okay. At Standing Bear Lake, we are just under 90% overall site completion. In November, we hosted the Nebraska Power Review Board members to both sites, an opportunity to kind of get a firsthand experience of what we're building and to kind of share the importance of these new generation facilities from a reliability and resiliency perspective to the grid. We hit a major milestone at Standing Bear Lake in December with the completion of the substation at the site, as well as the subsequent energization of it in mid-December. On the generation side of things, I know the last time I was here, we were talking about still awaiting some delivery of major equipment. I'm happy to report that all the major equipment for Standing Bear Lake has arrived to site. That includes our low voltage switchgear as well as our emergency diesel generator. So that's good to hear. Yes. The other focus on the generation side of things, we do have Wardzilla on site. As a reminder, they're the owner furnished equipment supplier of the reciprocating internal combustion engines. They're on site doing some phase 2 assembly of the engines and their auxiliaries. They've been here about a month and they have about 2 more weeks left to go on the last 3 units. That's going very well. There's a picture of that in the lower left-hand corner. You can see kind of a close-up of the engine within the engine hall. The other focus at the site is really kind of focused on completing construction and moving into commissioning The last kind of major emphasis on construction deals with installation of cable as well as the termination of that. Our EPC vendor has also ramped up electrical resources at both sites to support these efforts. And so really that's the focus as we move forward here over the next few months. Next slide. At our Turtle Creek Station, we are just over 80% overall site progress. Similarly to Standing Bear Lake, it also met a major milestone with the completion of the substation and its energization in late November. From a generation perspective, a lot of focus is on the erection and construction of units 1 and 2. So you'll see such thing as stack erection and construction, as well as assembly of the filter housing and other auxiliaries around the major equipment. Here we are also focused on electrical progress. And so again, the EPC vendor has brought on additional electrical resources to help with installation and termination to get us through construction and start preparing for commissioning efforts. One more slide, please. And then this is kind of like a holistic view, kind of gives a better image of the overall site progress. These are recent images, aerial drone photos at both sites. On the left-hand side is Standing Bear Lake Station. This is kind of facing in the east direction. You'll see the radiator bank, the exhaust runs, the engine hall, and then at the top of the screen, the substation. And then on the right-hand side is Turtle Creek Station. This is kind of looking from a southwest perspective. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see on the right-hand side is the administrative building. To the left is the water treatment building, and then you have Unit 1 and then Unit 2. So good to kind of see these over time and the progress. It kind of gives a good visual of the progress at the site. So before I turn it over, is there any questions that you have on Standing Bear Lake or Turtle Creek Station?
There are some external factors on timeline. Do we have any updates on status for permitting, GIA, that kind of stuff?
For permitting and what?
GIA, I mean, do we have interim GIA or do we have?
Interim GIA that will give us the ability to bring these units online in the interim process. And then once we actually get the formal GIA, then we'll be understanding if we have to do any upgrades and then do those if necessary. And then otherwise we'll go, we'll have those in formalized.
We're still expecting the final one to come in at the end of this year or first quarter of next year. Then.
Yes, yeah, okay.
And so that does mean that we anticipate these being online this summer, is that right?
Yes, the end of the summer, yeah.
End of the summer, great.
This is what the interim interconnection agreement allows us to do is start injecting power, but it's revocable. And so what we're waiting for is for that final irrevocable permit. That will be one of the key, probably the most important key piece for us to then proceed with decommissioning and retirement of North Omaha units 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. I think next up is Joe Lang. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's dive in with Platteview Solar. So a couple pieces on Platteview Solar. Maybe just some quick updates to this that are very recent. We are 100% complete on construction now from an OPPD perspective and from an AES Blue Ridge Power perspective. Last Tuesday, they backfed the solar facility. So they energized the GSU and potentially today, maybe most likely tomorrow, they'll inject test energy from the facility onto the grid. So some big steps there. And then we're anticipating COD in March, but the guaranteed COD is not until May. So subject to how things occur over the upcoming month or months here, that's some of the next steps we anticipate to see there. Next slide. So there's a couple aerials just from some drone shots of the north and south parcels. So you kind of get a sense of all the build out that has occurred there. There's also a central parcel. All in all, it's about 500 acres of property. And then next slide on K Junction. So we have, just quick update, we have our GIA, maybe a reminder on this part, our generation interconnection agreement between OPPD, SPP, and NPPD is the transmission owner out there of the line that we'd be interconnecting to. We're looking at schedule items yet, working on community engagement, so Lincoln, Dustin Marvel, Michaela Valentine, a lot going on from a community engagement out in that area. So the Planning and Zoning Commission has approved a draft of the regulations that's going to and before the county board at this point. Those regulations have about a half-mile setback from non-participating landowners. So that's a pretty restrictive solar reg that they've passed. So the county board is now reviewing that and taking that under consideration. And we've got lots of folks that are certainly involved with the county board and making sure that they're understand the impacts, what's reasonable, understand the risks, et cetera. And then the next step there is in March, the county board's having a public hearing to take comments on those regulations. Next slide. Next slide. So kind of quick stand-in for Mr. Danny Belt, just to kind of keep us rolling. So Danny Belt's in the major project organization, working with Burns and McDonnell as our strategic partner. Is currently working on some of the project management plans. Maybe just taking a quick step back. So this orange line here is the new 345 line from Cass County Station up to Turtle Creek Station. Just the additional context, it was approved by SPP to address some contingency reliability issues between Nebraska City and the metro area. So that's about a 23-mile line, and you can see it kind of extends east to west here and up by Louisville and up by Springfield and then up to our Turtle Creek Station. The team is looking at some of the specific details on substation configurations at the ends of the facility, at the end of the transmission line. And then on January 8th, letters went out to the homeowners along the route, letting them know that there'll be some of these efforts in the area. And then land management will be meeting with the landowners and chatting with them about the project and then getting access to land to be able to do some of the environmental reviews that are necessary. Construction for the project is anticipated in 2026. Okay, next slide. So some key items on our new natural gas generation. You all probably recall this quite vividly from the board resolution in August. We're going to be focusing on this line here on dual fuel combustion turbines, 600 to 950 megawatts that was approved. Next slide. There's 4 kind of key decisions that we'll hit on together here. 600 to 950 megawatts. Again, the board resolution gave us a range to help us react to turbine availability, load forecasting, et cetera. So we'll touch details there. Turbine technology class, so some of the specifics of the turbines themselves and what we selected and why. The turbine manufacturer, the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, we'll touch on, and then site selection, specifically where these turbines will be installed. Next slide. Okay, so the board resolution again was 600 to 950, and working with the board and very thoughtfully that we walked into this, because in here just a couple months ago, SPP released a loss of load expectation that was anticipated, but it's there's no decisions on this specifically yet, but the planning reserve margin is currently 15% is the SPP rule, and the loss of load expectation study will likely change the planning reserve margin from somewhere between 27% to 46% in the winter months. So as we've seen in the winter, we've had various issues within the SPP region with certain generation performance. So we'll see the loss of load expectation likely rise notably. And certainly that impacts OPPD from a perspective of our accredited capacity that we have online and available in the winter to meet our load. And then a kind of an interacting piece of this is solar energy doesn't credit well, virtually zero in the summer. So I'm sorry, in the winter. And so certainly that's an element of natural gas generation and kind of help guide us of how much we will need. These are kind of two competing elements. This one's maybe a little wordy, but in essence, the consideration there is the interconnection capacity. When we're interconnecting to the SPP grid, the more we seek to interconnect, that increases our risk of interconnection upgrades and costs for those upgrades. So in deciding 600 to 950 megawatts, we're trying to take all that into consideration. However, certainly the kind of counteracting piece is looking at the load forecast and looking at our resource portfolio and new generation. If we were to choose on the lower end of the 600 to 950, there's a increase in risk of not being able to meet the planning reserve margin requirements in the winter months. And then this, we're just seeing all across the map, but just as a friendly reminder, construction, EPC contractors, labor, equipment, materials, et cetera, continue to timelines and constraints, et cetera, we continue to see, and in many cases, continue to even extend beyond what we're seeing. So in the decision perspective here, because of the very dramatic increase in the planning reserve margin that we expect to be approved for the winter months and load, et cetera, we are pursuing natural gas on the higher range of the 600 to 950. And we'll hit that in a little bit more detail as we walk into the turbines and kind of how that how those Legos are put together.
If I may, there's another element in here that just for the board's consideration, and we've been talking about with the CNPE, Customer Portfolio Engagement Committee, about the load forecast and the load coming in and customers requesting. That is also a very important key element here in that we haven't seen a decline in requests. We have seen those requests be very stable, if not increasing. So a combination between of what Joe just talked about, we're seeing an increased need for more accreditation from SPP, especially in the winter. And we're really not seeing any decline on load demand forecasting. And that's important. We've talked about how in decades past, OPPD board members have had to debate and discuss and weigh in these factors. That's what we're bringing in here, is that we're not seeing anything that tells us we need to slow down or change course. If anything, it's moved faster and bigger based on all the factors that we're discussing here. But my commitment, as we've mentioned in April, continues to be to bring this information back to the board, both on the load side, understanding our customer base and who's requesting what's changing there, and then of course from an SPP requirement.
Okay, next slide. So decision 2 is the technology class of turbines. If you could picture, there's lots of different types of class of turbines, like Standing Bear Lake Station, for example. We're putting reciprocating engines up there currently. There's F class, H class, J class, advanced class, et cetera, et cetera. The analyses that resource planning, Colton Kennedy's team performed, Standing Bear Lake Station addresses our fast acting generation needs. So those are kind of automatically out because those aren't needed. And so there's the F and H are the primary turbines that we've looked at here. Advanced class or even larger units, and our generation interconnection requests that we have to the grid have limits on them. We submit a megawatt number, and so they have a ceiling. So the advanced class, the larger ones, which are 400 megawatts or so plus, where an F class unit is about 220, 225 megawatts, and H is like 280 or so. But our GI, our generation interconnection requests really limit us from going for the advanced class, which is which is fine from an analytics perspective, regardless, because we're really looking for some of the smaller, sporty units, if you will. So considerations in choosing F or H class: affordability, just simply looking at the cost of the assets, what they produce, et cetera. Reliability, maybe one big piece on reliability of these units, and it applies to kind of multiple of these things, but how I kind of lay it out from a big picture perspective. F-class units are kind of like an F-150, if you will. You go out on the road, you see lots of F-150s, and an H-class is more like maybe a 250. They're out there, but they're just not nearly as many. And so from a reliability perspective, there's a lot of the F-class, parts availability, et cetera. It's a unit that we feel has longevity, is well proven, et cetera. Environmental sensitivity, the F-class units do have a better environmental profile, especially as it relates to NOx. Planned outage frequency, by going with more smaller units, the market, when it needs some generation, it can pick up fewer units at a time. So we find the units are parked at minimums less often, putting less hours on the units, less starts on the units. So it helps us from outages and maintenance perspective, and that kind of goes into the operational flexibility piece as well. So the decision, going through all the analyses, landed in this F-class units from our technology. Next slide. And then site selection. So this is a big one. A big piece is timing is a big element here. And so as we get into greenfield, brownfield, certainly community impact is a big piece, and timeliness is certainly a big one. So from a greenfield site perspective, we need to go out, do our siting studies, acquire the land through whatever types of agreements and structures, et cetera. But it takes quite a bit of time to do that. We have generation interconnection agreements that we've put on our current land to make sure we have a path for our new generation, and going back to the greenfield site really slows us down by a matter of year or years. So we did choose and kind of lock onto the brownfield site aspect. We certainly need natural gas capacity for these sites. That's a big piece of the review. And as we touched on, wastewater from the facilities themselves for cooling water is the wastewater aspect there. Certainly noise constraints. And then we hit the generation interconnection piece, and then air permitting. So looking at air permitting reviews and modeling to make sure to minimize any sort of air permitting risks of the sites. So the decisions here is Turtle Creek Station and Cass County Station for the units. Yes.
Do we have to do a new GIA for the additional generation at these two sites still?
So we had some generation interconnection agreements, generation interconnection requests out there already for Turtle Creek Station and some for Cass County Station. So by and large, we already had those requests out.
So they're already in the queue.
Yep. So all the interconnection requests for these units are currently in the queue. Which, the GI requests, the GI risks are very significant. So having those requests out there from a timing perspective is very important.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide. Then on the manufacturer themselves, so we've walked through the turbine class and technology, et cetera. So this kind of gets down to the specifics of now we know what we want, where we want to put it, what's the exact, who's going to manufacture these for us. General Electric, Mitsubishi, and Siemens provided us proposals, and they're really the three primary, if not the only, manufacturers of F-class units. The pieces in our review, we had in our solicitation, certainly we have lots of requirements around the solicitation itself and lots of technical requirements. So weighing their responsiveness to those requirements, environmental sensitivity, diversification, commonality, those kind of counteract each other. Having diverse resources, if there's any systemic issues with a certain manufacturer of turbine, diversity help in that regard. So you're not kind of locked up in any specific issues, but commonality helps as well. In the sense of our staff, our workers, they're trained, they know what we have. If there is a systemic issue, we know that it's how to address it with a multitude of them. So those kind of counteract in some degrees. But delivery dates with the individual providers, what delivery dates they can hit to ensure we're able to move along promptly. We'll say delivery dates has been a significant dynamic. So we'll hit here a really high level schedule of steps. But when we had the board resolution and then we went out for these proposals, the delivery dates were changing by the manufacturers as we were in discussions with them, because they get some locked up and get some locked up and get some locked up. And so the slots, the manufacturing slots that were originally proposed to us were shifting multiple times during those discussions with them. And certainly from a timing perspective, that impacts us in that regard. Economics, certainly the cost of the units, which all led us to the Siemens units. Next slide. So just quick review. So decision went on volume. We ended up with 900 megawatts, and that's really a big piece of the kind of, this is kind of a circle of life a little bit here, in the sense that the F-class turbines are 225 megawatts. So selecting 4 of those gets us to 900 megawatts. Again, they're the F-class units, Siemens, and then 1 will be installed at Turtle Creek Station and 3 at Cass County Station. Turtle Creek Station has 2 units currently under construction, so I'll make a total of 3 at Turtle Creek Station, and Cass County has 2 units existing, so it takes a total of 5 at Cass. Next slide. Okay, so we kind of hit this. Board resolution was in August. We narrowed down sites and manufacturer, et cetera, in January. Here we are in February. Well, Robin Spady, head of regulatory affairs, and her team working on PRB, Nebraska Power Review Board filing for approval. And then some emergent type things after that are the EPC energy, the engineer, procure, construct contractor will be pursuing. So we're working on those bid packages and hoping to get that out in Q2 of this year. And then that back and we'll have more clarity on CODs, et cetera, after we have those construction contracts nailed down. Likely 2029, 2030 timeframe. Of course, we want it as soon as possible. So to the extent contractors can help us with that, that will be desired. It's 8% of corporate.
Thank you, Joe. You can go ahead and advance to the next slide. I'm Kate Thomas, Director of Corporate Marketing Communications, and we'll just briefly touch on our stakeholder outreach and engagement efforts. So this is really just to remind us that as we move ahead on this work, we're committed to the same robust outreach and engagement approach that we've used over the past years as we've been talking about new generation. So this is one more step in our engagement journey. We listen, we learn, we improve our engagement and outreach processes. Next slide. And as we start talking about these new locations and equipment, really 3 key messages that we're going to reiterate to our customers, to our stakeholders, to our employees. 1, the rationale that's driving this need, how we're growing and why we need this. 2, the benefits of this diverse energy portfolio and how these resources add to that. And then finally, how we are still committed to our net zero carbon emissions commitment. Those 3 things exist at the same time, and we'll make sure that we reinforce that. Next slide. And then just a little bit more granular on some of the items around next steps that Joe alluded to. Our engagement and outreach begins with sharing more information about this work. And so information about this new generation will be posted on OPPD Community Connect. We'll have a wire story and information on our social media channels today, immediately following this meeting. We'll continue to proactively connect with our stakeholders and those in the community just to make sure that those lines of communication remain open throughout this process. And then finally, as Joe spoke about, we'll file with the Nebraska Power Review Board following the meeting today and hope to hear an approval decision in March. And once we do, we'll be sure to keep the board and our customers up to date. That's what we have. Back to you, Joe, or Scott even.
Next slide, please, Aaron.
Have anything else? What are you showing?
Oh. Well, we can go regardless. We can talk to it.
I'll find it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon. Scott Edom, Director of Engineering Services and Utility Operations. I'm here today to share with you some great updates happening at North Omaha Station. You might have pictures, but I can talk to them anyway. The teams have done, I'm sorry?
We've got pictures in diligence.
Oh, great. Okay. So the teams have done great collaborative work and execute well on projects spanning the entire site, multiple units to enhance their safe and reliable operation and prepare for the eventual conversion of units 4 and 5 to natural gas. From a planning perspective, we are preparing for the Unit 5 outage. It'll start here in early March. We'll conduct preventative maintenance and other improvements to ensure reliability now and post-conversion of that unit to natural gas fuel. Some of the projects in design and procurement stage, that Unit 5's burner design and procurement. So we do have to remove some existing interference and do foundation work for some of the fans that'll be needed for those new burners. That work is being supported by Olson, a local engineering firm. Regarding compliance with the Clean Water Act, which is part of our permit, we are upgrading our intake traveling screens. So that design and procurement for those screens are underway, and we expect those later this fall in September. So a lot of great work there. Probably the best part to highlight is the construction that's actually happening at site. So the electric aux boiler, which again will be used when we do convert and the units aren't running full time in the winter to provide heat to the station. We have installed a lot of piping to support that new system, which is the upper right picture that some of you can see. We've cut a hole in the turbine deck, which is quite impressive to see, to allow for the aux boiler itself, which is in the last stages of manufacturing. The ash landfill closure project is underway, and we are completing those in phases with 2 of the 4. There it is. 2 of the 4 phases being complete. That's the lower left-hand picture. We also have temporary ash storage buildings that we are constructing. We've done a lot of great work with respect to some of movement of other sites in coordination with our transmission friends to make sure that those buildings don't interact with the site infrastructure. And regarding completed projects, we did complete the Unit 4 turbine and generator inspections last fall. So that's the center lower picture. That's what the steam turbine looks like when the internals are removed. So we'll be doing similar scope on Unit 5 this spring. And then the lower right-hand picture is a completed cofferdam. That was a 1960s era retaining wall, for lack of a better term, that we definitely need to replace to ensure continued safe and operation. And that project was completed on schedule, and that's the new retaining wall with some cover rocks to prevent excess erosion. So that's what I have to share. Any questions?
Yep. A lot of the timing on this project is contingent on external processes. We talked about it briefly earlier, the final GIA for the other new units.
Yes.
We just touched on it, but is there any status update, or what's the process at SPP? How will we know that things are moving forward over there? How do we keep track on, are they doing what they have indicated they will do on the timeline that we have indicated would be aligned with the end of 2026?
Yeah, so high level, the answer is yes, 2026, we're still on track. But there are a few things that need to happen. We continue to get results, and in fact, we just got some results a few weeks ago indicating that all of our studies, all of our analysis are corresponding to what SPP is seeing, which is we're not seeing an imminent need for additional infrastructure, but we won't know that until we have the final interconnection agreement. But so far, all of the indications continue to come in positively, in that what our expectations are is what SPP is seeing. So 2 things need to happen is, 1, get the final generation interconnection agreement, and then finally get SPP's agreement that the plan of decommissioning, retiring units 1, 2, and 3 meets the reliability standards based on all this infrastructure. So everything is moving in tandem, and we're still tracking for 2026 as being the big year of a conversion, so that we can begin 2027 with converted units. But our teams are very carefully looking and following everything. We understand how important this is for the board. We have clear direction from the board on SD7 in terms of emissions, carbon emissions at North Omaha Station. So that is the method that I use for accountability for the organization, to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to meet that. If there were any changes to that, you would probably be the first one to hear from me.
Great. Appreciate it. Thanks very much for the update. Anybody else have any questions on this specific project? Okay, yeah, I had requested this be added to the list today, so thanks very much for making this available.
Thank you. Director Williams, maybe if I can make a few comments, if that'd be agreeable. So I think what you're seeing today in the room, and I think we're in that early afternoon lull where that lunch is sitting right in the bottom of our bellies, or at least it is in mine. But what we just heard was enormous. And I just simply want to, recognize the teams for honestly their grit to continue to move this stuff forward. It's one thing to have models and to say, these are the things we need to start doing. That unleashes a substantial amount of attention to the organization and maybe some anxiety. It's another thing to say, it's these things, it's that many numbers, and it's in this location. And we just crossed that threshold today, which is an enormous accomplishment for the collective organization. And so I felt the weight of that. And I know you have some comments as well, Javier, but just a tremendous amount of focus and drive to really get us to this point and honestly keep us moving, building on some years that were fatiguing and full of challenges to keep us charging into the future and keeping the velocity up. I don't know if you'd add anything or not.
Well, I will add, you heard today about Platteview Solar, and you also heard about K-Junction, which is the other part of the portfolio. We're talking about the diverse portfolio of energy sources, and we heard a lot of information about our gas units and converting our North Omaha Station. You heard a little bit about the renewable part of the portfolio, but for the public's benefit, I think it's important to acknowledge there is a lot more work happening behind the scenes. It's not mature yet. It's not ready for public discussion, but we've had enough conversations with board members to share that this is the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more behind the scenes, and we will come back with even more information, more milestones that we're hitting, not only on our natural gas part of the portfolio, but on the renewable part of the portfolio, which is really exciting too. Just as a reminder for the public, we have between 2019 and 2023, the board has authorized us to procure 3,200 megawatts of new generation. That's almost doubling the size of our current generation portfolio. We are delivering on the first 700 this year. And you just heard of 900 megawatts where we just placed orders for turbines. You heard about the K-Junction project, and you will continue to hear more about this, which is gigantic. I think to Brad's point, we're not only talking about this, we're not only planning, we're actually doing. I feel very comfortable, very proud of the organization. I get to participate in different forums with other CEOs of other utilities, and I would say by and large, coast to coast, north to south in the United States, virtually every utility is looking at how do we meet the electrification challenge we have in front of us. But I can tell you that OPPD is very lonely in a very select group of utilities who are actually doing. We started talking about these 4 or 5 years ago, and we are doing, we are delivering, we are ordering things. We talked a lot about the benefits of having an engineering certificate authorized in August. This is a gigantic benefit. Having the teams authorized to go out and start figuring out and engaging vendors on time so that we can get very large piece of equipment ordered is incredibly important. We are not only competing with regional utilities, we're not only competing with national utilities, we're competing with global utilities. I can't get into a lot of detail, but we know as we were discussing and negotiating contracts for these 4 turbines, there were many other countries, consortium of national interests coming in and placing orders ahead of us, moving our production line and timelines out to the right. So having the ability to move even faster, placing orders for generators, turbines, generation step-up transformers, it is a key advantage, and I strongly believe that it will pay off gigantic dividends in the years to come when our generation comes in on a timely manner. I believe that supply chain challenges that we're facing in the industry, we will continue to face as the majority of the world is looking at augmenting their capability for generating electricity. It gives me a little bit my heart skips a little bit because it's a lot of work ahead of us, but we are ahead of all of it, and it's exciting. It's a very proud moment for OPPD. And you asked about boards. What can the board do to support? And I think it's remaining engaged. And really, when you have a chance, whenever you see an OPPD employee out on the street or here in the building, it's thank them for all the work they're doing, because it is monumental what we're doing to transform the utility, and it's all to serve our customer owners. Thank you for.
So I just wanted to remark that it took a long time for us to make a decision on power with purpose and then to implement. This has been monumental, and the board resolution in August, and now we already have a plan. We already have things in motion, and that's the credit to the entire organization, to Brad's team. And I can't imagine what a lift this has been for you. So thank you.
Credit to supply chain, credit to tax insurance, credit to finance, credit to system protection from technical specifications, credit to engineering. Everybody back there in the room here, they're all right there, and they've got to operate seamlessly and efficiently. And thank you for your comments.
Anyone else, comments? Great. Well, yeah, I'll echo the appreciation for all the work that's gone into getting from where we were in the middle of last year to where we are now, identifying the, location, quantity, type of hardware that we'll be seeing moving forward. Kudos to everybody involved in that. I know that's huge steps forward. So appreciation for all of that. Looking forward to hearing how all of that progresses, and how the rest of our portfolio moves along with that to meet the needs of our customers. So yeah, I think we're doing a great job at seeing growth, hearing demand from customers, and responding with the appropriate technologies to meet our mission, vision, values, strategic direction, and making it all happen. I agree, more proactively than others who have not yet recognized what will need to be done. So kudos to everyone on that. Really appreciate it. This is the last item on the agenda, so if there aren't any more comments, then meeting is adjourned. Thanks very much, everyone.